Happy New Year, everybody. This is the new and improved Warhammer 40,000 podcast by the name, or which goes by the name, showing off the improvements early doors, of the Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000 podcast. My name is Dan, and it is my privilege, pleasure, and honour to welcome you to this, the latest episode, and I am joined, as ever, by my good buddy, Phil. How's it going, Phil?
Happy New Year, everyone. We're still in a pandemic.
The pandemic is super fun, as well, you know. We are now in our third lockdown, which is a wonderful time. But fortunately for me and Phil, we now have the exciting fun of starting to do this podcast on a weekly basis now, right, Phil?
I know, just like lockdown number one.
We're bringing it back. We're bringing it back.
It's like we made the lockdown happen by deciding ahead of time we're going weekly.
That's it. That's it. Although, please do not hold us responsible in any way for that series of events. I do not necessarily want to claim responsibility for that. But yeah, look, I mean, here's the thing. This is the first of the way it's going to be going forwards, and that is to say that this part of the show, which has normally been known for a long, extended, rambly session, won't be that way no more. We're going to basically do a bit of an intro, say what we're going to be talking about, get straight into a 5-star review, assuming that we've got those to give. And then we're going to get into the content as it is supplied. So, Phil, unless you have anything especially special to add at this early stage, we may as well get on to the 5-star review.
Well, let's not forget, we're still going to have a end of show ramble. And it's all being moved to the end, basically.
That's it. That's it. Basically, even though this is now becoming a bit more rambly than we hope to make it in the future, again, it's the first one out of the gate. You got to go with the way these things go. Essentially, we decided that probably for a lot of listeners, they don't necessarily love the long extended rambling at the start. So we figured let's get rid of that and then just hold it to the end for the people that like it to enjoy it where it is relevant for it to appear. But yeah, as I say, that's how that's going to work now. So there we are. Weekly, as we said before, let's move on to the 5-star reviews. All right, guys, just for context, I asked Phil to do a jingle for 5-star reviews, and he didn't. So out of desperation, I asked my brother to do one, and this is what he came up with. Apologies.
Well, howdy, partner. These boys keep joshing us about with all their chitter-chatter about little plastic figurines. They've asked me to do this jingle for them. I don't know what they're talking about half the time. But anyway, now it's time for that 5-star review. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of the show. And let's all pray that it doesn't go on as long as it did last week. Yeehaw!
This week's 5-star review comes from the lovely land of Australia, Honda Racing _000, and he has written disgraceful 5 stars, oddly. I'd have to say from the outset, don't you think, Phil, that a review that reads disgraceful 5 stars might be a bit, misleading to some of our potential new clientele. They might read that and think, hang on a second here, what's going on? Doesn't sound very good if you're using disgraceful.
But once you get into it, all will be revealed.
Yeah, exactly. 5 stars. I just unsubscribed to Vanguard Tactics. Bring back Joe, or bring Joe home. It said specifically. I ad-libbed there. So some initial fan feedback from people who are obviously thrilled to bits that Joe's not on the show anymore. Wouldn't you say so, Phil?
I know. Sad times, and they're feeling the hurt, I bet. He's completely correctly placed where the blame lies.
Exactly. But at the same time, we don't neither support nor encourage the unsubscribing to Vanguard Tactics. That is now Joe's home. So,
just make sure you're subscribed to us. That's all that we care about.
Exactly. Give him hassle. Make his life miserable. But don't, but not so miserable that it will affect his ongoing income. He needs his money. But Phil, you're going to now have to fill in for what normally was or historically was Joe's duty and say thank you. God, it's been a long time since I spoke. Say thank you to Honda Racing _000 for his lovely 5-star review.
Dear Honda Racing, I wonder what your other hobby could be. Thank you very much for your kind words, for your support of Joe, who's no longer with us. Dearly departed, R.I.P. He who shall not be named ever again. Let's move on, onwards and upwards. Thanks very much, and keep your sub with us. That's where it's deserved.
I mean, it's probably worth saying that, moving forwards, we will still call out some of the older reviews where Joe is being called out, but ultimately we'll try and, make sure that, those reviews are more representative of what we are now. But if you would like to leave a 5-star review, please do. Maybe some that don't necessarily sling abuse at Joe, or they do. I mean, again, it adds an extra layer of entertainment to the whole proceedings, I suppose.
There's always in-jokes galore happening in those 5-star reviews, so
exactly.
It's bound to be.
But anyway, there you go, guys. That's our 5-star review. Let's get on to the content that is the show. Transitional noise. Woo! So Phil has actually just told me in the weird absent sounding space between now and then, or then and now, there we go, order, that I actually forgot to say what we're actually going to be talking about today. But fortunately for everyone listening, it should obviously exist in the title section. But we are going to be talking about the Forge World Legends that were released in November. Because believe it or not, our Philip is a fan of a certain force of Forge World miniatures that he doesn't really like to talk about too often. But somehow I've managed to persuade him to want to kind of talk about them today. Right, Phil?
You twisted my elbow to get my salty tears out. Crack a few more out into that little bottle when there's a tiny violin also playing at the same time. Yeah,
a beautiful thing. A tiny shovel shaped violin. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a horrible sounding instrument, but the visual is all that we require. So yeah, look, I mean, I think it's fair to say that there's been a multitude of instances where we've had a chance to talk about the Krieg over the last few months. What with the release of the Imperial Armor Compendium, the chats that we had previously, kind of building up to their impending release, and this in a way is the kind of final chapter, if you will, in Phil talks about how unhappy he is with the changes to the Krieg. Although there has been a relative amount of positivity up to this point, right, Phil? You've become slightly more
yeah, I've just gotten used to it, I think, is the general summary in advance. It's like, and I'm moving on to Space Marines.
You've gone through the various stages of grieving, and now you're just at the acceptance stage.
Just the over it stage, so it's fine, even though it's not good. But yeah,
you're a little older, you're a little wiser, you've moved on with your life. This is just the way it is. But yeah, look, I mean, I think the legend stuff is always really crazy interesting because this is a pretty new concept still within the world of 40k. Historically, with the way that the game was from years past, you could still rock up and use things because the competitive tournament scene wasn't nearly as vibrant as it has been the last few years, and also the nature of the game was such that it was still totally viable that you could bring along old Forge World stuff that may have been out of production for a while, and I guess if you owned it and you had the rules to accompany it, then it was all kind of fair game, so to speak. So yeah, it's interesting that not only, Citadel miniatures have moved into the world of Legends, but obviously Forge World as well. Although I guess there's a couple of interesting caveats to make about this. One was the way this all got released was a bit strange. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Or not necessarily strange, but a little bit haphazard. Two, despite having probably over 130 data sheets in this Legends PDF, they haven't got everything. So there is still some stuff missing, right, Phil?
Yeah. The ones I can specifically think of off the top of my head are the Krieg heavy stubber teams, which are twin heavy stubbers. Forge World still sell them, and they neither exist within the Forge World Compendium or Legends, so they just don't have any rules for them, which is a bit of an odd one. And
I mean, those heavy stubber teams are coming in the next
Time Codex, perhaps.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Or maybe they're just like, but we'll just still sell them. But it is a bit odd. I think there's lots of oversights. As I said before, there's models that have been discontinued but are still in the compendium, so still have rules. And then, yeah, there's some stuff that they still sell, but in Legends, which is mind-boggling as to why that is as well. So,
yeah, I mean, that was going to be my third point, is the fact that, and there's also stuff that has not technically met the criteria of being made a legend, but yet there it resides, which is
very strange.
Very strange. Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's fair to say that this isn't a problem that impacts the majority of 40k players. I don't think it's a problem that impacts the greater majority, the greater minority of 40k players. But for those that it does affect, it does definitely create some very irritating instances and some very frustrating moments, albeit in some cases, yeah, okay, in the case of Space Marines, you're losing out on some very, very specific variants of vehicle and some very odd characters that, may or may not have had miniatures in the past, but, introduce some weird, janky rules. But in some cases, there are definitely some things that have been taken out that may have been the cornerstone of a lot of players' armies. I'm looking at the Eldari, as I would do, and there's definitely been some very iconic things removed from that range. Same thing for the Orcs. Yeah. Same thing even for the Necrons, right? I mean, there are data sheets in here for Space Marines, Astra Militarum, Adeptus Sororitas, which was interesting.
That's the old Repressor, which is like sort of, I think it was like a sort of troop transport Rhino, but like a
that's the one.
Rhino. It's such a cool model. It's a shame it's gone.
I have no recollection of what it looks like whatsoever. What was it about it that made it cool?
It sort of was like a Rhino, but with a mini sort of. The top bit was all raised up and had like portholes going all the way along, and it had like a little sponson gun, which was I think twin heavy bolters on the front. It had a very kind of industrial Adeptus RBTs look to it, which is I think a lot of people, the old style when they had the old metal models. I think got it for that basically.
Sounds amazing. It's a shame it's gone.
Well, exactly.
You got your Chaos Space Marines, you got your Death Guard, Chaos Demons, Renegades, and Heretics. Obviously, those are a loss felt by a lot of Guard players as well. Necron data sheets, Orc data sheets, Eldari data sheets, and Tau Empire data sheets. So the only things that hasn't become Forge World Legends or had an entry in Forge World Legends are your Custodes, your Drakari, and something else maybe. Oh, Tyranids as well. Tyranids managed to do it. And they've got quite a big range of Forge.
They've got a decent size, because I've got most of it. They're pretty, I think, all reasonably modern, or at least supported well enough to keep them around. Custodes is a brand new range, so obviously that won't go. Although you say that, like a lot of brand new Horus Heresy stuff that is maybe only a year or two old has been discontinued in the past. So stuff can disappear even though it's new, but predominantly most of the stuff that is gone is either things that never had rules in the first place, which I believe is some of the Badab War characters, and then most of it
it had rules but didn't have characters.
Yeah, so it had rules but didn't have models. But most of them all had models, but they've all been discontinued over the years. A lot of these are like 10, 20 years old. So that's why. And the thing to remember with Legends is it's still match playable, is literally not for competitive play. But I think most people...
Because a tournament organizer could give you the go-ahead to use it.
Yes, yeah. There could be tournaments that are like, we're going to allow Legends, which I think would be great, and I'd like to see more of that. But whether you will, I don't know, because I think most people see tournament play as like the main bar to like play games by. So even if you're not necessarily, even if it's just you and your mates in your sheds, you could well be doing, match play. But when people say match play, they often mean tournament rules. They're playing the GT sort of tournament pack and stuff. The weird thing is allowing Legends is the Forge World stuff is all fine. I think the reason why a lot of older Games Workshop stuff, so all the 2019 Legends stuff, they were all kind of the weird janky ones that got abused, like chaplains and all sorts of weird stuff from the Space Marine range, and sort of weird variants of weapon options that were quite often abused. And obviously some Forge World stuff was, but those models like Leviathans have just been toned down. So,
well, I mean, it's fair to assert that people have been using Forge World as a means of creating janky combinations for as long as I've been playing 40k, because there's always been weird combinations. I remember I went to a campaign weekend back in, crikey, would have been like 2010, 2011. Went to a campaign weekend for the Badab War, done by a gaming group called the Tempest Fugitives. That was what they were called. Used to be headed up by a guy who I think works for Wayland or is involved with them in some way. I can never remember his name now, but I think he used to do some stuff with Beasts of War back when Beasts of War were associated with Wayland. Anyway, yada yada yada. The point is that I went to that, and I played at a game, and then like the opening game I was playing against a Salamander army that was taking Salamander Razorbacks out of a Forge World book that had come out in like 4th edition, and that featured twin melter gun Razorbacks or something, and then they were cheaper than regular Razorbacks for some reason as well, and it was considered completely fair game because of the way the rules used to work back then. And that's one of the interesting things, because historically we've not had legends as a consideration. You know, the way it used to work from 3rd to 7th edition was if we released a rule, and by we I'm using the royal we to describe Games Workshop. If Games Workshop released a rule in like 4th edition for a thing, and they never got around to updating it all the way through to 7th edition, it was still considered to be a totally legitimate option. And to use it as an example, the Drakari or the Dark Elder were using their 3rd edition book all the way up until the end of 5th edition. So for so many editions of 40k, we were just used to armies just rocking up with old rules. That was just how it went.
I remember the Guard Codex came out at the end of 6, and it was the very last, or one of the last codexes, and then basically didn't get a 7th edition codex at all because it was considered to be new. So yeah, it's definitely a different mindset that we're now in, that each edition has its rules. Obviously, you've still got hangovers, like we're still playing with 8th edition codexes. Like that's still considered okay, but we're not playing with 7th edition codexes, for example. There was a while when Forge World would just have like PDFs because their cycle of producing campaign books was so slow. They'd only ever do a couple a year. They would just do PDF rules for some sort of go-betweens.
Yeah. Well, up until this new Imperial Armor Compendium, I mean, that's what the Custodies had. All of their stuff was PDFs. And I mean, so much of the range was still PDFs, even though they did a complete range of compendiums or indexes early on in 8th edition. But I mean, what do you think about people's perception to legends before we actually get into talking about it? Do you feel like there's a bit of a negative stigma around it? Because I feel like what I've seen from the community is that being relegated to legends is essentially no better than being discontinued. I mean, I feel like totally fair enough. Please elaborate.
Like just from not necessarily my reaction, but just seeing people's reaction online, especially in the Krieg group, people are treating going to legends as being, taken to the farm up the road and shot.
To the glue factory.
Yeah, off to the glue factory. Telling poor Timmy that your dog is going to live with a neighbour up the road, but really he's being turned into, I don't know,
some piece of a throw rug. Not that you could probably make a throw rug out of
a mounted headpiece on some weird gentleman's fireplace.
A tea cozy or
something. I think most people see it as just getting completely written off and discontinued. And to an extent, I get it. It's like, because they've actively said, we will give you these rules, but we will not support them any further. We will not balance these going forwards. They're balanced at release, but we won't provide updated rules. So in theory, in less than a year's time, whenever the latest chapter approved comes out, which if it's summertime again, because the last one came out in summertime, that could be 6 months' time, and automatically these are all out of pointed and redundant, and not many people have even had a chance to play games with these rules if they wanted to. And also, I think the downside is a lot of the interesting rules have just been stripped out of them. In the same way, when we went through the compendium, all the fun and interesting rules are just gone. Like they're balanced in air quotes because they're boring and a bit basic, but they're okay. Like they're not interesting. They don't have any cool things, not necessarily in a broken way or a cheaty way, but just like there were some nice, interesting rules that they had before that were very thematic, and they've all gone.
Well, that was one of the interesting things when they released the Red Gobbo, because the Red Gobbo started out as a legend. He's never been a standard unit for the Orcs. It's just, here's the Red Gobbo, we've released him, and his rules are legend. And he was like 20 points, 25, maybe 30 points. And his rules were actually really good for like an Orc HQ unit. So it's weird as well, isn't it, right? Because in some instances, when it's promoting some, promotional miniature, here's some really funny rules, but don't worry, it's just legends, which again creates a weird sort of scenario, because it forges this narrative that don't take legends seriously because we're clearly not. And then again, it's one of those weird scenarios where they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, which is to say, this is a viable thing that we've done. Be grateful that we've given you this way to continue playing and to continue engaging with these miniatures and these units, and you can still use them. But at the same time, we're going to release rule sets for other things that are going to go straight to legends, and those things are not to be taken seriously. And I think that's one of the interesting things. And I think it's about understanding what the kind of thing, the motive is here. Because I think what Games Workshop has obviously tried to do is create a situation where they're not the bad guys because they've done something. But sometimes, in a way, it's almost better that you just didn't.
I mean, they've got a few options. One, to not do any rules at all, which would just anger so many people. I think this is the halfway house. Do
you feel like they would be more angry than this?
Oh yeah, if none of these units had rules, like if the Krieg just didn't have anything beyond what's in the compendium, that'd be awful. I mean, it's only marginally better, I would say. Richard, for example, made a point about how the D99s, or was it D66? D99s. There's a sort of crack Elysian regiment that were from one of the campaign books, the Amphibian Project. They don't. I think it was
the weird elder one, the fall of
No, sorry, it was the Amphibian Project, because it was them versus Tyranids.
Okay.
I know that because I had that book. I mean, they might have appeared in a different one as well, but I know for sure they were in the Amphibian Project. And historically, in that campaign book, they all died out at the end. Spoilers. So I guess they had a particular time and place, but you could still play with them, and they were great. They had really cool rules, like basically better versions of the Elysians, and they don't exist here at all. There are sort of, they've given you the basic Elysians, or the few Elysian specific units are in Legends, but most of the Elysians just don't exist because they're standard codex stuff now, I guess.
Yeah,
but it's a bit odd. Like, they could have done a nice nod to those people like Richard that do play or did play with the D99s, like by giving them a couple of extra rules and data sheets. But I guess they've gone, we've got 130 odd to write up in over a few weeks. We've got to do as little as possible because what we're doing is a lot.
And do you feel like that's what happened here, that they did the bare minimum?
It's hard to say behind the scenes. I mean, when the first version of this PDF that came out, it was riddled with errors, really obvious mistakes, which we can talk about in detail now if you want.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, I was just going to say, and again, getting into the sort of topics of things anyway, there were definitely some interesting instances in this book, or PDF rather, where I saw things that made me believe that almost certainly this this is a bit of a rush job. And I think, again, going into the Krieg related thing, I think the Grenadiers illustrated that to me perfectly, which was that the Grenadier squad is the only Krieg squad now that has weapon skill 3 plus, besides, captains and Venom and so on and so forth. And that told me that I was like, oh, okay, I get it. This is a situation where they've effectively decided that we'll take the old Forge World rule and we'll just slap them into this, Legends PDF and not necessarily consider what had come before, because their equivalent Scions are not weapon skill 3; they're weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3.
Yeah, they just left them with the old army-wide ability of everything's got weapon skill 3 up, which is fine in the context. And if all the Legends was like that, and it also included the current stuff like Death Riders in a Legends variant where it was all weapon skill 3, that would make sense. But if you were trying to play with Legends, with your Death Riders and with your Forge World Compendium, you've got this weird mismatch of some of my units are weapon skill 3 because they historically were, and other stuff just don't have it. And you've got the elite Death Rider close combat unit with weapon skill 4 up, and then you've got a elite shooting unit that has also a better weapon skill than the close combat unit, which is just bonkers. And the Grenadiers in particular also didn't have access to their special weapons or the heavy flamer team initially, which is something they did fix in a later update. Because when I first got this, I went straight to the Krieg section and had a read through. The very first one is Death Corps Marshal Karis Venner, and I was reading his special rule, which they've since updated, because it basically was like select one unit within 6 inches. That unit ignores the combat attrition modifier. And I was like, but the army-wide rule for Krieg is that they ignore the combat attrition modifier. Yeah. And it's so obviously broken. You're like, whoever wrote this did not know that rule at the time, or did not check it. This has definitely not been play tested. So the argument that these are balanced and have been play tested, I think, is incorrect. I think they've just sort of ballpark, gone, yeah, this seems pretty balanced. It's not too broken. Let's stick it out there. We're not going to play test 130 odd data sheets. There are people that play test. I could be wrong, but that just seems such an obviously broken thing that couldn't have been the case. Like, someone would have spotted that. But it has since been updated. It's slightly better. Let me just zoom in so I can actually read it.
Do you want me to read it with my superior eyesight? The implacable officer at the start of the movement morale phase. So at the start of the morale phase, select one friendly Krieg unit within 6 of this model. Until the end of the phase, that unit automatically passes morale tests.
It's sort of all right. I saw a lot of people hate it.
It's very good, mate.
It is good, but it's like they already have bonuses that affects morale. So it's like, forget those bonuses. We just replace it with something better. And it's a bit more like the old rules, so I quite like it for that reason.
But this is something that I'm surprised, and this was something that I was expecting to see in the Krieg as a standard concept. Like, I was expecting the +1 weapon skill aura or the fearless aura. Like, if your standard marshals came with this, your company commanders came with this, that would be fantastic. All of a sudden you'd be like, actually, okay, cool, I could take a couple company commanders, and then all of a sudden I can chuck this aura out onto some important things.
Or even if this was their army-wide ability, and it's like one unit a turn gets to ignore casualties from morale, I'd be like, cool. That's actually possibly better than the current one.
But what's staggering about this is, and it's not the rule that I want to really get into the weeds on right now. What I want to get on into the weeds on is how frequently they've updated this thing in the past 2 months. I mean, this thing came out on November the 9th initially, and since then I can at least think of 3 updates they've done, because the first update they did So they did the original version of it, so version number 1. Version number 2 was the Gorgon fix that you and I, or you specifically, noticed straight away. And now, obviously, there's this Venifix, and that Venifix wasn't there until who knows when. So who knows how many times they've gone back.
Yeah, it was a few weeks. I think it was like a week or so later where they went and did like a proper update on everything. But they did do a quick hotfix for the Gorgon Transport, which I guess we can cover next. Basically, the Gorgon Transport came out, I had a look at it. It had literally no transport capacity in the rules, which is odd because it's a transport. It's a super heavy transport. That's all it does, really. And it didn't have anything in there. And then I think it was like an hour or two later after it came out, they updated it to give it transport capacity of 30. And I was like, but that's still wrong. So if you go to the Forge World website, if you look under Krieg, because they still sell it there, they list it and advertise it as a transport capacity of 50. That's historically what it's always had. That's correct law-wise. And in terms of the models that you could use to put in there, you could get up to 50 and they could fit in. So it's sort of odd that they've given it the wrong transport capacity, and they've sort of stuck to their guns on that because they haven't changed it. And obviously people have written in to complain about it. I know I myself have written in just to go, this is wrong. Also, just seems wrong on the fact that that's not what they advertise when they sell the model.
Yeah, because here's an interesting question. It's a question that we've discussed in private, as it were, on many occasions, and maybe on this podcast as well. At what point, and given that this is a game, at what point does this then become, essentially a piece of false advertising on their website? Because ultimately, if you were to purchase a piece of DLC for a video game that said, buy this thing and it does this thing, and it didn't do the thing that they said it was going to do, at what point does that become misrepresentation on their part? Yeah. Because I understand that you can check the PDF and the PDF contradicts the online retailer listing, but, it's fair enough to assert that, at the end of the day, if Element Games were selling this and they had listed it with a transport capacity of 50, that would be an honest mistake because Element are not Games Workshop. They are not Forge World. Therefore, it's reasonable that they may not have updated their online listings. But for Games Workshop to have not updated their online listings for a product that they've been selling for 2 months under false, benefits is very interesting. I mean, again, I don't want to sort of go crazy and make out like this is a terrible, terrible thing, but it is a thing, right?
It's the weirdest glaring error from the whole Legends thing. It's the most standout one is the Gorgon. It's like it wasn't on sale. It was discontinued a year ago, pretty much to the day. I think it was maybe Feb time last year, or I think it was, or maybe
Christmas. No, it was November. It was November 2019. It came back.
They advertised it. Krieg players, get your Gorgon here. They did a big song and dance about it and promoted it. They basically sold it to 40k players, a lot of which may be tournament players, and they sort of sold it to them. And I know an awful lot of Krieg players were absolutely desperate to get hold of this model, so loads of people who have gone out of their way last year, bought that model. It's a big model, takes a while to build and paint, so it might have taken...
Well, it's not an easy build either, right? I mean, it is those tracks, I remember you telling me about them, or saw the pictures of it, they're a nightmare, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I think the latest version would be slightly better than the one I got, because mine was one of the last ones before they got discontinued the first time around, like 4 years ago. I think now it's a lot easier from what I've heard.
So even now...
I think it's just that there was some slight size differences on my one, which meant just lots of sanding involved. But even to this day, people will still message me saying, "Oh, I've used your guide on my YouTube channel," because I did it I think it was like a 12-part series on building and painting the Gorgon, because it is a complex piece of kit, and you get like 2 A4 sheets of photocopy paper for instructions, and it isn't a step-by-step. Well, it's a step-by-step guide, but it isn't easy to figure out. You've got to stare at it and use your brain a bit to work out what goes where.
It's like figuring out a Rubik's cube quickly.
Yeah, but it's like
look at it.
But imagine you bought this thing. It's what was it, 150 quid or thereabouts?
175.
175 pounds. You bought it this time last year, and then 8 months later, maybe it's basically like, yeah, you can't play this anymore. It's not to say you can't play it, because yes, you can take it to events. Well, no, you can play it with your mates, but you can't take it to events. And if you built this as like the showstopper piece in your army because you want to go to Warhammer World and get in the cabinet as like a best painted army or something, that's a bit gutting if that's sort of your mindset. If you want to take these minis to events, like
totally. And especially then as well, to have the functionality so drastically reduced as well. It's like, you might have built 50 guardsmen to go with it, specifically building a strategy around using this massive transport, and, spent a lot of money if you bought Krieg squads specifically as well to fill this thing out. And that's the thing is, I don't think it is unreasonable to suggest that this is a incredibly irresponsible thing for Games Workshop and Forge World to do. And I don't want to sort of over-egg it and make it into a massive problem. I mean, at the end of the day, there are bigger issues in the world than this. But at the end of the day, these guys run a business and they need to behave like the business that they are. And you shouldn't be creating this kind of negativity and this kind of nonsense, especially when you've demonstrated to us that you are willing to update this PDF frequently. And what would it take for GW right now to go, you know what? We did muck up with a Gorgon. We're going to take it out of the Legends PDF and we're just going to put it in to the FAQ for the Imperial armor. I'm just going to make it.
That's all it needs, and they've done that already. So in the FAQ for the Forge World book, they added in a data sheet for, I think there's like a Death Guard vehicle that was missing. So they've acknowledged that one and put it back. It's a bit odd they haven't done it with the Gorgon.
That is incredible.
It's just a bit bad faith. Like like most of you who are not Krieg players are probably like, what are these two rambling on about? But if you're someone that's gone out of your way to buy this mini, has a lot of value to you emotionally, having spent hours building it and painting it, to then be told you can't take it to events when you specifically bought it for that purpose, that's a bit of a blow. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people that just don't care. They've got the mini, it'll look great on their shelf, and they don't play it all that much. But I think for a lot of people, it's a big investment, and they're pretty disappointed by the way Forge World has done this rollout.
But it's also the knowledge that, what changes 2 years from now when 10th edition drops, right? Admittedly, 2 years is probably too soon for 9th edition. 10th edition. What happens in 3 years when 10th edition drops? And all of a sudden, these rules become even less relevant. I mean, then what happens? Because potentially in 3 years' time, because of a massive deduction in sales of this thing, they probably still got it on the store in 3 years' time. Are they going to have to actually acknowledge this mistake in 3 years' time and go, oops, and write it in? Or is it potentially, and here is the mad harebrained scheme, is it potentially that this is getting a plastic kit?
That would be quite mad. I think what's more likely happening is it's not meant to be a 40k model anymore, and it's just going to be a Horus Heresy model. And that was the argument a lot of people had of, what you're worried about is Horus Heresy model. So actually, there's always a 40k model first, and the Horus.
Yeah, but if it's a Horus Heresy model, why is it covered in Krieg?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
It has the Solar Auxiliary on it, fine, but it doesn't. It's covered in Krieg.
Yeah, let's move on. I'm talking about it's a weird one. It's a shame. It's mind-boggling as to how their justifications behind it, but it is what it is. But
why I think it's interesting, and I know, look, I mean, apologies to those that have had it up to here with us talking about Krieg, and if you have, obviously, we promise this will be the last time, at least until the Guard book drops, and maybe when we get onto the topic for other reasons, because inevitably it'll come back around. But look, I mean, it's just a bad. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and I think, it's concerning for your kind of faith in a lot of these things, because ultimately when you invest large sums of money and you invest large amounts of time, I mean, Phil, admittedly, you put yours together with a view towards doing a step-by-step YouTube guide. So you take a long time to do this stuff normally, times 5 when you're doing it as a YouTube thing. But I mean, under normal circumstances, I mean, how long do you reckon you would guesstimate it would have taken you to build and paint one of those if you just did like 8-hour days? Like if you were doing working weeks, how many do you think it would have taken you to have gotten through that?
I reckon it was... I think it was a good like month or so of time,
so
but probably not in terms of like if you were doing it, I would say 2 weeks at least. Like if you're doing like a 9-to-5 job or something, building it, it probably would have taken me 2 weeks. And a lot of that was the build because there was a lot of like bits to update and fix on it, do some green stuffing, some gaps and things like that. But then also painting it took a good week and a bit.
I mean, that's a nearly 100 hours of your life there spent doing something for no reason. I mean, that's crazy. Like, that's the thing where you've got to start to be realistic about this. I mean, don't get me wrong. It takes me a long time to build a Space Marine Redemptor Dreadnought these days. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm not under any concern that thing's going to cease to exist. But
no.
Yeah, it's interesting.
If it was just like that on its own, you might go, that's a bit of a hiccup from the PDF, what gives. But then there's a list of all these other errors. So the Death Rider Commissar is the only Death Rider that's horse can't attack because there's no profile for the hooves. Because they just list all the weapons that the Commissar has, but haven't said that it's also armed with, you know, hooves, because it needs that to be able to do the attack. So the Death Rider Commissar, and again, you said the PDF's been updated several times. That's still an omission. It's like, I remember specifically the points at the end. There was it listed 2 types of centaurs that had different points attached to them. So like, well, which am I meant to be using? And eventually that one did get fixed. So in the latest update, they did actually get around to at least solving that one. And I think there was a bunch of other just like general little bits here and there that didn't make sense. Errors, mistakes. Yeah, it's just a bit weird.
And that's in the stuff that obviously you're reading extensively. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other stuff in here that's probably struggling with similar issues that we're not aware of simply due to the fact that we don't obviously spend as much time, or I certainly don't, and Phil obviously doesn't spend as much time really getting into the weeds on those. And I think it's just interesting, isn't it? And I think, so noting that there are mistakes galore, noting that, you know, there's some weird decisions. Beyond that, is there anything that you're seeing in this Legends that you especially think is a positive? I mean, again, I'm not trying to sort of be devil's advocate in this side of things, but I mean, I guess if I was going to be, you can kind of acknowledge that it's interesting in a way that GW has tried to support these ancient old models. And if you look at it from a business perspective, you know, this isn't technically something they have to do, but at the same time, I don't know. It's weird. It's difficult for me to defend it because I just think I understand in certain instances why they have to discontinue stuff. I totally understand that, but at the same time, it's sort of like if you're gonna do this, to me, it's one of those things. If you're gonna do it well. Like, don't just phone it in. I know, like they're not necessarily just phoning it in, but I can't see any evidence to the contrary at this point. It just seems a bit. Yeah, it seems a bit lackluster.
I think there's a few general issues with it. Like the first one is that it is one PDF for all the factions. They could have done individual PDFs for each faction. That makes it much more manageable. If you want to print out your factions because you want them printed when you're gaming, or you just want to easily be able to scroll to your pages, you can do. Like having a 144-page PDF and trying to find your data sheet that you've got to play on like your iPhone is super annoying. It's not easy to do. The fact that there's no pictures, again, same with the Forge World Compendium, that is really unhelpful to a lot of players. I think those little bits were just really basic bugbears that was like, these are easy fixes. You could have just, and I've seen actual people online split them down and release them as faction specific PDFs just so they're easier to digest. There's another one I noticed similar to the Gorgon. There's the Arcurian Stormhammer, which is it was originally a Horus Heresy model. It's like the giant Baneblade with like 2 big turrets on it. That was I think that was released to 40k maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and now they've instantly basically said it's not playable for 40k, which is a bummer if you're a 40k player and spent that money to buy that model. So that's in a similar boat to the Gorgon. There's one really cool rule, and I wish they had given this much thought to the rest of the PDF, or even just the Krieg specifically, because it has to do with them. So at the very bottom of the Astra Militarum stuff, there's the war gear options. All the things like cool things like coax, like the Conqueror cannon, for example, which had this cool ability because it had a coax cannon. If you shot at the same target, you got to re-roll all your shots from your battle cannon. These are all now just a battle cannon with a pintle mount, which is a bit rubbish, but whatever. So the cool thing was, again, let me just zoom in so I can actually read it. So you've got your Lehman Russ battle tank. It says, if this unit has the Krieg keyword, any number of models can each have their 2 heavy bolters replaced with 2 las cannons for plus 10 points. And what does this mean? The 2 heavy bolters in question can only mean your heavy bolter sponsons. So what they've done in the Legends book is they've said if you're a Krieg player, you can have las cannon sponsons on your Lehman Russ. This is one mind-blowing, but also so freaking cool. And it's like, why is it just in the Legends? It's like, could you not have just slipped that into the Forge World Compendium? Like that to me is like, that is like the saving grace, the cherry on top of a kind of a not very nice tasting pie. But it is so cool. It's like, it's a bit thematic because it sort of matches up with how like the Malkador tanks look because they've got las cannon sponsons. As a Krieg player, I'd be all over this if it was an actual option that I could take to events, but it's not. It's just something I can do when I'm playing you in your shed. So in a way it's good, but it's also disappointing because it's like, it's so cool. Like, this is really cool. But it also makes no sense because Legends is all about just giving you the models as is, and just giving you basic rules so you can play them. It's odd that they've given this rule that never has existed before. There's no models for this. There's no las cannon sponsons beyond the Malkador tanks. You can't get them for the Lehman Russ. You can convert them up though quite easily because the whole weapon on the Lehman Russ is a las cannon, and that's got the same sort of mounting peg for the sponsons. So you can easily do it, and it's such a cool thing. It sort of seems odd that they've thrown that in there.
Crazy times.
Have you got a positive? Have you got something that you like out of?
Well, look, I mean, I was going to say that I think in terms of positives, there are some positives because I think they've done some really weird stuff in here, and I wanted to go through some of my personal highlights from the book because there are some units and some things that are interesting, and I definitely want to take a moment to talk through some Eldari stuff because, you know me, I love my my Eldari, and if we're going to talk about the Krieg, I may as well get the chance to talk about Eldari. But the first thing I want to talk about, because I think it's bonkers and it speaks to my recent disappointment with regards to trying to get hold of some of the Forge World tiles. There's actually rules in here for a Forge World tile. Did you see this, Phil?
Yeah, the Necron one.
No. Well, okay, yeah, the Necron one as well. Fair enough. There is 2 then. Sorry, I didn't see the Necron one. I missed the Necron one. There's rules in here for 2 tiles, but there's one in there for the Castellum Stronghold, page 30, which, if you don't remember, Phil, is the 2x2 foot tile.
The big guns.
No, not the big gun. This isn't got a big gun. It's the one with sort of a raised kind of like helipad area.
Space Marine Stronghold one. Yeah, I remember.
Well, yeah. Well, again, there's the Imperial Stronghold one that I own, but then there's this thing which is something else entirely, and it's bonkers. I just love the idea that they've gone, here you go, here's some rules for an entire quarter of your board, or not a quarter as such, but I don't know, 1/5 or whatever it ends up being.
This is the rules that they always had. You could always buy a top.
Could you always get rules for this?
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
One had it. This one I think did, and there was another one that was similar that does have two big, like a big turret gun on it. And it might be this one, or there's another one. Maybe it is this one, and it's the same one. It's an optional thing that you can stick on it.
Well, it's a weird thing, right? Because it's not the tile itself that has the rules, although the tile is the area itself, or the entire tile is the thing. It's the various bunkers that essentially live on it. So you've got the main bunker structure, and then you've also got the bunker annex, which I love the idea of that. Like, obviously when you hear about annexes, you remember, your early rental arrangements in, after you maybe left university and your first job is like you end up living in an annex somewhere. So I can imagine somewhere in the Imperium, there's some, recently graduated, relatively impoverished young, professional somewhere in central London, renting something like this. So there'll be lots of like joss sticks or whatever they are, and tie-dye rugs on the wall and whatnot. But anyway, I mean, in terms of the way it works, that's quite interesting. Is obviously there is a bunch of different rules, a bunch of different weapons, a bunch of different things that you can kind of put on this thing. Little weird benefits like communications relay, which is if in your command phase, if your warlord is embarked in this, you gain 1 CP. I thought that was quite a cool idea. So like the idea that, he's kind of commanding the troops from within his bunker. There's loads of war gear options. Again, the whole set of rules about it being a stronghold. After it is set up, models in this unit are treated as separate terrain features with the following terrain traits. So you're defensible, light cover, heavy cover, obscuring. And then there's a bunch of rules for fire points, automated weapons. And then there's the wreck rules, which is each time this model in this unit is destroyed, roll 1d6 before any embarked models are disembarked before removing it from play. On a 6, its stores explode, and each unit within 6 suffers D3 mortal wounds on any other results. The bunker is wrecked. Though the model counts as destroyed for all rules purposes, do not remove it from the battlefield, because obviously it's a bloody great tile that's stuck in the bottom of your board. You're never going to be able to get rid of it. So that's quite interesting. Transport capacity is pretty massive. It can take 30 infantry in the Tacticus bunker, and then it can take 12 infantry in the annex. I mean, it's just a mad old set of rules. So again, it's nice to see stuff like this, because interestingly, obviously, as Phil has said, there were rules for these historically. I was not aware of that. I must have never have had the compendium or the book where these came from. But when I was reading through these, I was like, when I saw the Castellum Stronghold, I was like, what even is that? Yeah. And then when I looked and found out it was a tile, I was like, that's mad.
I have a feeling this one only had PDF rules, because it was one of the last ones that they did, and it would have been, there wouldn't have been a campaign book that it would have been in, I don't think. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, because I do remember the Necron ones appeared in the Fall of Orpheus book, and that was, I mean, I didn't really have many of the Forgeworld books before that, but I think that was quite new for that time that they've done that.
I mean, the weapons you can put on this thing as well is mad. You can actually put whirlwind launchers on this thing.
Yeah, I kind of wonder where you're meant to get a lot of the stuff from, because they did do kind of like small like little turret stuff, but I think they were meant to be like standalone things. And but I think the mounting units were compatible with some of the Games Workshop ones. So, for example, like the battle cannons and your Icarus las cannons, for example, I think were kind of compatible with those Games Workshop bunkers that seem to have gone the way of the Dodo. You can't get them anymore. Any of the old.
Well, I mean, the main thing you're never going to get hold of anymore is that flipping tile. Like, good luck.
Yeah.
Those have very much gone the way of the Dodo, as we say. It is, much to my disappointment, buying those Forge World tiles is not easy. Not that I would have actually have liked it if I had ever bought the thing, because speaking as someone who has owned or does own one of those Forge World tiles, they are one of the most awful things to have to make work. They're never the right shape. In order to fix them, you've got to basically, the way I sort of fixed it was I had to take it outside, strap it down to a table, and then pour loads of boiling water over it for ages. It was like, this is the most insane thing ever. And I did query the guys at Forge World Customer Services. I was like, is this really what you consider acceptable for however much money it was? And it's like, oh yeah, that's just how they come. It's like, right.
Yeah, I think that's sort of one of the reasons why I've discontinued them, because there's probably lots of complaints, or not even just grumbles like, oh, it's a bit difficult. They never, even when they were properly done, like lining up very well. Although weirdly they do the Titanicus ones, which I assume are a lot better, and maybe it's because they're a lot lower to the ground. They're not quite as high. Maybe that's they've got different techniques. Maybe
I heard someone remark about them as saying that he knew someone that had the full set of Forge World tiles, and he described it as it was like playing on 6 wobbly stools.
I did love the city tiles. I really wish I bought them, because they were fantastic. Although saying that, I was looking through the list earlier of the models that have gone to Legends because they no longer sell them, and the Cerastus Assault Ram, I'm actually gutted that I never got a model of, because even when I wasn't a Space Marine player, this is one vehicle or flyer even that I just really wanted. And the rules aren't too bad either. It's got a twin Magna melter. It's a heavy 2D3 melter gun. Well, that's not too bad. 2D3.
Is it blast?
It's blast as well, which would just melt some faces.
You should have bought that, mate.
No, I know.
You're going to have to just get 2 of those Space Wolf ones
and glue them together. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's got some missiles. It doesn't really have any other special rules, though. It's got a transport capacity of 10. But yeah,
it seems low because hasn't it got 2 chutes on it?
Yeah, I guess it's 5 in each. I think that's probably correct, based on what it was before, unless it could have been something like 12 or 15. But yeah, I'd have to dig out the old rules to see how they've changed stuff. There's certainly some odd things where, like, I really wish they did the old artillery centaurs for Krieg. Sorry to go back to Krieg. So there were always 2 versions of it. There's the artillery one, which is for towing around your small artillery pieces, and then there was the assault variant, which was heavily armored. Grenadiers came with it, so it was a completely separate kit from the artillery one, and it had this cool special rule that and this is in the index of 8th edition, that if it had grenadiers in it, it could do a pre-game move. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. But it was like so hard to get hold of. And now, since Legends, I've managed to buy, I think, 3 of them, because people are just offloading kits. Like, they're all original Forge World in like their bags. Obviously, I paid a bit for them, but I was like, I've always wanted these. I was always holding out and hoping Forge World would reinstigate them and start producing them again. They never did. So because of Legends, I think loads of people are offing like all these kits that they've been hoarding for years. So I managed to finally get those, which is a positive in a way. But the downside is it doesn't have the cool rules that I kind of was one of the reasons why I wanted it in the first place.
I mean, one of the things that I was toying around with for a while was looking at the Eldari Corsair range. I was eyeing them up for a very long time.
I was doing that years ago as well, actually.
Oh, mate.
If I was up in Forge, it would be the Corsairs.
Well, not anymore, maybe. Well, who knows, maybe. But I was up at Games Workshop's Warhammer World, sorry. Words. I was up at Warhammer World sort of 2019 time. Maybe it was like early 2020, but I think it was late 2019. I remember in the Games Workshop Citadel store of Warhammer World, they had a load of like Corsair stuff that they were just selling cheap in inverted commas because it's still Games Workshop. But they had a load of bike kits and a load of other kits there, and I was like, oh, it's so tempting just to buy all of these right now, but like I just didn't. I don't necessarily regret it, but I mean the Corsair Skyreaver, which is the Corsair jet bike, is one of the most awesome kits. And what's mad about it is the Corsair Skyreaver kit is pretty up to date, because the Corsair Skyreaver kit is made for the modern Eldari jet bike, which only got released in 2015, something like that. So this thing isn't a crazy old kit. And actually, when you read their rules, they've got some really interesting stuff to them, because the Corsair Skyreaver band is still a troops choice. So they're still troops. They're a minimum unit size of 5 up to 15. They come with a brace of pistols, because obviously Corsairs love their brace of pistols, which is pistol 2, strength 4, 1 damage. They've got a dissonance pistol as an option, which is pistol 1, strength 5, -2, 1 damage. Each time this attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified hit roll of 6 automatically wounds the target, which is pretty reasonable. They've got the Sparglaive, which is strength user, 1 damage. Each time a bearer fights, it makes 1 additional attack with this weapon. And a Void Saber, which is essentially a rubbish power sword because it doesn't have strength +1, which is a bit annoying. But essentially, they've got their ability of Reckless Abandon, which is this unit is eligible to form heroic interventions as if it was a character, which is super awesome. And they also have a budget. Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Also, they're allies of convenience. So if your army is Battleforged, this unit could be included in a Craftworld or a Cabal detachment, and models in the detachment still gain their detachment abilities. So if you were in a situation where you could play play tournaments and utilize Legends rules, there is a definite argument for the Corsair Skyreavers because they're troop choices, therefore they are OBSEC, and the points for
also
them
infantry
are not. Mm-hmm.
They're also infantry.
Oh, sorry, yes, because so I've made a terrible mistake. They're not the jet bikes, are they?
Are they the ones where it was just like sort of jump packy?
Yeah, they're the ones
like
with the
wings.
wings.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, sorry, it's the Cloud Dancers that are the jet bikes.
I guess that's why
my bad.
It's still. I guess it's like toughness 3, but it's still got 16-inch move. 16.
I know they're whippy.
That is
they're whippy boys.
Easy.
That is mad, isn't it? And the thing is, I mean, like, they are a pretty interesting looking squad. I like the Corsair helmets. I think they're pretty wicked, and the overall look of them. But yeah, I mean, the points that you pay, I mean, all of that stuff still applies in terms of their insane movement, because they are. Oh wait, no. Oh look, Phil, another mistake. So they're listed here as troops, but when you go to the point section, they're fast attack.
That is a consistent thing, and I guess we can just say it, a consistent thing across the Forge World books. So like I said, it happened with Moloch. Not Asterion Moloch. The Dreadnought character. It's not him. Achios Hekaton.
Yes,
and they fixed that, so he is now officially an HQ choice. If I remember correctly, they FAQ'd the Death Riders. So you had the Death Rider Command Squad, which was weirdly listed as a troop, and then you had the Death Riders were listed as elite. And if I think I remember rightly, they've just made them both fast attack. So historically, Death Riders are fast attack. The Death Rider Command Squad was listed as fast attack, but it was always historically elite, and they made the Death Rider Squad elites when they should have been fast attack. They're now both fast attack, which is a bit odd. Maybe that's how they want it to be, but it's odd that the Command Squad used to be elites, and they've moved them across to fast attack. I guess that's a thing that seems to be an ongoing error that they've done throughout. It's a bit of a weird one.
I mean, and again, it speaks to the complete lack of like attention to detail and general kind of lack of quality of this PDF. Because again, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's just riddled with mistakes, and I just find that so hilarious that it's just yet again, it's like, oh, okay, good. I mean, admittedly, I made the mistake by assuming it was the jet bikes, but
if there was some photos there to show you what you were looking at, that would be really helpful. And obviously, you can't. I mean, you can try googling some of these, but it's not like you're going to the Forge World website to get an official source of what each thing actually is now. So you've just got to hope your Google search comes up correct.
I'm going to finish up by talking about, or at least finish up in terms of discussing certain units by just talking about the Vampire Hunter for a moment, because the Vampire Hunter for a long time was a very iconic Eldari, Forge World miniature. To call it a miniature is probably doing it a bit of a disservice, though, in the same way as maybe a Manta for the Tau is a miniature. This is a big boy. It comes with some rather large guns. So let's see if they've done our little Vampire Hunter justice here. So a Vampire Hunter has 32 wounds, can move up to 50 inches, has ballistical 3+, strength and toughness 8 for a flyer. Bear in mind. Admittedly, though, it's not a flyer on its profile. It's a Lord of War. It's got 6 attacks, leadership 9, and a 3+ save. A Vampire Hunter is equipped with Scatter Laser, 2 twin pulse lasers, 2 twin vampire pulsar, Spirit Stones, Crystal Targeting Matrix. The Crystal Targeting Matrix now is that you can advance and fire heavy weapons as if they were assault weapons, which is weird because you're never going to need to do that, but there it is. And the Spirit Stones is 6 up, feel no pain. Or ignore wounds on 6s, because I forget that it's been a long time since feel no pain was a word that people used all the time, but we still do. The twin pulse lasers are 48-inch range, heavy 4, strength 8, -3, flat 3 damage. The twin vampire pulsar is heavy 9, range 60, strength 12, -4, D3 +3. It's airborne, hard to hit, wings of Cain, which is essentially you can turn 90 degrees at the start of your movement and then perform an extra 90-degree turn at the end of your movement. Hover jet. In your command phase, this model can hover. If it does so until the start of the next command phase, its move characteristic becomes 20, and it loses airborne, hard to hit, and wings of Cain. It can explode, and if it does so, it does 2d6 range, doing d6 mortal wounds, bearing in mind it's massive. Distortion field, it has a 4+ invulnerable save, and then design a note before the battle. If you don't have the base for this model, both players must agree the footprint of this model as if it had a base. There you go. Funny little thing there. Keywords wise, it's got craft world abilities, so you could give it some craft world abilities that suit you, such as like ignoring cover and re-rolling 1 to hit roll and 1 to wound roll and so on and so forth. And it's a vehicle, aircraft, fly, transport, Titanic, vampire hunter. I don't know why it's got the vampire keyword and then the vampire hunter keyword. Maybe it likes to at some point.
It likes to hunt itself.
That's itself. It's its own worst enemy. It's like, oh no! I'm so twisted. I mean, that is good. But do you know how many points it is?
No. Do tell.
It's 600 points, actually, now I say it. It's pricey, but then it is 32 wounds, -1 to hit, toughness 8, for God's sakes, with a 4-up invuln.
What's that?
I mean, you're not taking that down quick, are you?
No, I know, but a similar point, I believe, maybe it was 800, that the Mastodon. Which would you rather have?
Well, I probably have the Mastodon because I can use it in competitive play, whereas this thing is unfortunately now a relic of the past. But it's just interesting. It's interesting, to see how they've interpreted the rules for it and what they've turned it into.
Whenever we looked through the Elder stuff, both in the Forge World Compendium and in the Legend stuff, it's like, there's a lot of interesting rules here. Like, whoever's done this half has put a bit of time and care into it. Whoever did the guard
except for when it came
like, oh, is there a special rule? Take it out. Don't need it.
Yeah, get rid of that. Can't have that.
The elder
None
stuff
of
is
that,
like,
no.
oh, let's keep that in. That's really interesting.
Well, that's always been one of the weird, strange aspects of Games Workshop is. I always sort of feel like when Games Workshop is writing rules for fictional things like Necrons and Elder and demons and all this stuff, they always come up with really interesting ideas. But whenever they come to things like the Guard, they always run out of ideas because these are people who probably don't really have... I mean, maybe some of the rules writing teams, members of the rules writing team have a military background. I don't know, but I doubt they're people that really have seen any kind of active combat situation or, have received any kind of like military training or any kind of combat, knowledge in that way. Not to suggest that I'm a person who has. I'm not suggesting I have been, but I think when Games Workshop employees, Games Workshop rules writers look at the rules for humans, they think of humans as they think of themselves, and they're probably a bit down on themselves, and therefore they write rules that are limited because they're like, wow, we couldn't do that. So it's always a bit like they run out of, they're not able to think of these fantastical ideas because it was just a human, innit? It's just
to an extent, I think. I'm sure there's a lot of historical war enthusiasts, and there's also definitely some reenactment people in there in the teams and stuff. But yeah, I think Guard always get a bit of tough love. I think, and so I don't necessarily mind that. Like as I said in the last episode, like if Guard are kind of bog standard, all the rules are sort of baked into their data sheet in terms of their weapon profiles, and they don't get a lot of special rules. Like that's cool, but they still need cool stratagems, and they still need to be a really functional army with just your bog standard las gun and a bunch of guys running around. But at the moment, it's like they don't have that, and they don't have any cool special rules. They kind of really suffer. Obviously, there's a few units here and there, but.
Not that this was really part of the conversation, but if I was looking at the Guard as a codex, as a designer, the entire design principle that I would work out for them is everything needs to be built around command infrastructures. Like everything needs to be about, quadrants with commands. And it's a case of like, here's our main command point, and then there are separate command teams, and then everything is then built out of that, sort of in the same way as synapse creatures for Tyranids. It all has to be about having the infrastructure, because the idea of the Guard is yes, there is the backbone of the Guard, which is the infantrymen, but they're all being issued orders, and those orders are being upheld by commissars, and that's that whole vibe.
I totally get it. They used to do that a lot more. You used to have a platoon structure back in the day, where you used to have your company command squad, then you had a platoon command squad, and the platoon command, and that they commanded the platoon. The platoon was between like 3 and 8 troop choices. It was minimum of 3, and that plus your platoon command squad equaled 1 troop choice for your detachment, which was actually a real pain, because it basically meant you needed a minimum of like 9 troop choices to fill up your minimum of 3 troop choices for your detachment, which was a pain. So everyone just took what was scions, like the grenadiers or stormtroopers or vet squads, because they were still your 1 troop choice. So I think that kind of structure was too limiting. But you are right, it needs to be built around commanders giving orders. It like Voxcasters should be like such an essential piece of equipment to every squad. You will be killing yourself to not take them. Like you will want to take them because they need to be that good. They need to be baked into the army. And like you said, everything should have officers. You should have not just your you've got your Leman Russes, and they've got commanders. Cool. But you need like your artillery, and then you got your you got your officer of your fleet, and then you got your master of artillery or something like that. You need all of those things, and you do need ideally different types of tank commanders. Potentially, you need sentinels. Maybe you need tank commanders for your sentinels. Like just give us loads of different options. I would say, going back to the Forge World stuff, like one potential positive that I would like to see out of Legends is this is a fantastic resource for creating official Games Workshop factions. So you've got the Renegade, Traitor Guard. They've all been discontinued and gone to Legends. They have been for a while. But you've also got Traitor Guardsmen from Blackstone Fortress. And I've said for a while, they would make an amazing plastic faction, a sub-faction for Chaos. Chaos could do with some more love always. There's never a time when they shouldn't have some more love. You've got your Elder Corsairs. They're a brilliant sub-faction. It's like, why go out of your way to create a new Elder race when you've already got lore, artwork, model design already just sitting around waiting to be reused, basically, or redesigned? You know, you've got your Krieg to a lesser extent, and you've got your Elysians. They, you know, if you wanted to update like the guard range to be something completely different, like turn all the Cadians into Elysians instead and make them a really mobile drop force troops. Like there's so many cool, like Forge World has so many cool units. It would be great, even some of these like Legends units, to see them move over into plastic. And I think that would be like the one saving grace if that's what happens. Like if in a year or two time, some of these cool units that have been Legends or actually start reappearing again because they've moved over to a plastic range. Like that'd be awesome. And that would sort of justify the pain everyone's going through who do have these models. Do I want to see an entire Krieg range in plastic? Probably not. But then that would also be, if you're a new Krieg player, you'd probably love it, and it would probably get more people into playing them. But for most people well, for me, I've got a relatively complete collection, so I don't really want any more. Just things like the scale would be off, for example, and that would really annoy me. It
would ruin it for you as well, though, Phil, if you didn't have your little indie darling. Right?
Well, I can't have everyone having it.
Exactly. What makes it special to you is that, you know, only you and your elite friends have it.
Well, exactly. Yes, as we sip whiskey and smoke cigars and snort caviar off our nose and stuff.
That's it. You're all out there, you know, snuffling for truffles on the weekend or whatever it is you do.
Exactly.
Look, I think in conclusion, with regard to this Forge World Legends stuff and in Legends in general, I think it's a really interesting experiment, and I think it's something that, in some respects, I applaud GW for their enthusiasm to try and support these dead ranges and to try and support these, you know, discontinued miniature lines. Where I get frustrated with it is where they haven't really implemented it as well as they could. And I think that is evident in the way that this has been written. It's evident in the mistakes that we've highlighted. And I think it's also in the way they've communicated it. And also, I think it's the way that the community, as I understand it, has adopted it as well. And I don't like the fact that, you know, they haven't, you know, I don't like the fact that the default is leaning towards not allowing people to use these rules. Because surely, if you've done your job correctly, these should be balanced at the point of writing and then should only become worse as time goes on. So realistically, it should be rewarding people for being loyal to a certain thing, as opposed to punishing those players and being like, "Well, yeah, we don't want you here." You know,
there's a few different ways they could go about it. You know, Warhammer Underworld, for example, has seasons of decks. So basically, the current edition plus the previous years is still in play for tournaments. Anything older is discontinued. They could almost do that with Legends. They could say, this stuff is all balanced as of today. For the next year, you can take it to tournaments because it's still viable. After that, we're not going to support it anymore. So therefore, you can still play it in match play games. You can still play it with your friends, but just not for tournaments. And that would at least allow people to get some more use out of it. It would give you, like I said, more kudos and more of like an official stamp of approval of these are okay to play with. And part of me is like, if they've already done the hard work in writing the rules, albeit maybe not very good in places, they've already done the hard work, they've already done it, is it that much more hard work to go, we can tweak these rules in like a year's time with chapter approved? I guess they're like, it's 130 data sheets. Do we want to do that? No. Which is a shame, because I think if they just said Legends exists, we're going to support it fully indefinitely for like another edition, like all through 9th edition, we're going to balance the points every year along with all the other, you know, standard GW stuff, but it's just not going to be available for tournaments. That would, I think, still annoy people. That would still annoy me personally. But
again, is this one of these situations as well, though, where you and I represent a bit of a vocal minority because we are at the kind of bleeding edge of players where we like competitive events, but also enjoy and have had the money to purchase an obscure range of Forge World miniatures that,
well, that's true,
you know, go against the mainstream grain of gaming. I don't know. I mean, you know, in your case, Phil, I don't think you were buying all this stuff from the outset expecting it to be outdated, but then at the same time, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the mindset is. I don't think anyone's thinking that far ahead, right?
Well, that's the thing. I think at the time when I got into 40k again, that's probably like 8 years ago. So I think even then, some of the Krieg line had been discontinued, or some of the, you know, molds had broken. So we were in this sort of ebb and flow. Stuff would get discontinued for a year, then it would reappear back again. And it was all cool. There was only a few things that maybe disappeared. I think if someone had sat down and said, look, mate, like, if you get this army 8 years time, your models won't be playable at events. And actually 2-3-4 years time, most of these models won't be available. So you've got to buy them like quick with whatever money you've got. If someone had said that to me, then I would have seriously reconsidered. I probably still would have gone ahead with it because I just love the models, and that's ultimately why I got into Krieg in the first place. Is I just love the look of them. It wasn't because they were cool; it was just because they looked cool. But yeah, it's a tough one. I think you know, now there's less of an incentive. You know, if you wanted to get into Krieg now, I'd sort of think you're a bit mad. But at least you know what you're getting into, right? You know where your rules are going to be. They're going to be standard Astra Militar and stuff with a couple of new units. Yeah.
No, I'd agree with that. And I suppose last little thing on all of this, where do you sit with regards to the people who were sad that their very specific characters that unlocked certain optimized competitive builds? Where do you feel like you stand with regards to their feelings? Are you shedding a tear for those people that were running obscure Howling Griffin characters that gave them very specific buffs that unlocked very specific competitive options?
Cry me a river. I sort of think that the tournament players are the people that have ruined Forge World for 90% of the player base of Games Workshop. It's like
strong word,
but it's true. The index rules going back to 8th edition, some of them were a bit busted in places, and it was the tournament players that abused them because they were good, right? And it basically then they nerfed them to the ground to the point where they were pretty much unplayable for a lot of units and a lot of factions. You know, some got away with it in a more or lesser extent. Things like Contemptors and Leviathans was just always good, like throughout the edition. Whereas other stuff, a lot of the Guard stuff started off being really good early doors and then just wasn't after a certain period of time. So yeah, people that are always min-maxing or going out of their way to chase the meta or to find effectively a cheat in the system to find those rules and exploit them. It's like, I don't really feel sorry for you if that model that you bought now no longer works.
Well, I mean, and the thing is as well,
why you bought that model. I mean, it's a bit different. Go on.
There was never a model for them in the first place. It was just literally they would have converted a model to fulfill the brief of being, you know, the Salamander's apothecary or whatever it is.
Yeah, if you're like a Badab War reenactor and you've got an amazing Lamenter's army and your chapter master no longer has rules, it's like, oh yeah, shed a tear for that, because it's like you've probably painstakingly gone out of your way to convert it for an army that you're lovingly going to play. You'll still play him as your chapter master, but just not have special rules anymore.
Well, I mean, it depends though, right? Because you potentially do have the rules in here for certain characters. So you've got your Astral Claws characters. Howling Griffins have got a Chaplain Dreadnought. Marius Errant have a guy called Anton. There's Fire Angels, Raptors. The Lamenters have still got they've still got a Chapter Master character. But here's the thing, right? He's a chapter master and he's got a pistol and a specific type of sword by the looks of things. And don't get me wrong, his it's like a power fist or something. Either way, the point is you could easily still take that miniature that you beautifully converted and run it in a tournament legal army and just go, yeah, there's my captain, he's a chapter master, and he's got a power fist and a bolt pistol now.
Yeah,
I
think there's a lot of stuff you can do workarounds. My Death Rider Commissar on horse is just going to be my Death Rider Commander now, and he just won't be a Commissar model instead, sadly. But and a lot of units you can sort of do that. Like Grenadiers are going to be Scions. There's some things, like the Centaur models. I was actually building them this year, and it's like, cool, they don't have rules anymore. I just go back in the box, I guess, because quite often I build stuff specifically to take them to events. So now there's less of an incentive to do that. Now I could, maybe I'll get off that mindset and I'll just focus on building stuff because I want it, because I've got so much stuff now that is in Legends. I've got the Macarius Omega. I've got a ton of Centaurs and Assault Centaurs, and probably a couple more that are just like don't have official rules anymore. So will they just sit in a box? Maybe, but I'm sure one day I'll get around to building them, and by that time they probably won't even have Legends rules because it'll be 3 years' time.
Probably. But there you go. Look, I mean, there it is. Legends is an interesting thing. I think this is the most interesting addition to Legends because it's the biggest influx of data sheets into the Legends category. I was, deeply upset by Legends 2 years ago once the Legion of the Damned entered into the ranks of Legends. That was really when it all started to become very real for me, where it's like, oh. Because I like every 40k player who was playing it back in the 90s, the Legion of the Damned army was always the pipe dream. Everyone wanted Legion of the Damned.
Do you know what? My first Space Marine army was Legion of the Damned. I had this was probably back 14, 16. I had like a squad that were like the original Legion of Damned models. I had a captain that I converted up, a weird tech priesty character with a grav gun that I'd converted up out of like a plasma gun and a las cannon and some weird wires that I'd stuck on. The one model I never had was like the special sergeant that had the holding up the skull. Yeah, I coveted that so much. I never got hold of it. But that was such a cool model.
Yeah. And it's weird, isn't it, to think actually now that there are so many people. Again, here's the mad thing. There's so many people getting into 40k now that don't know what Legion of the Damned are.
Yeah.
Or at least don't covet them in the same way. Like Legion of the Damned were so iconic once upon a time, but now they're just.
I mean, there's so much scope. Like I said, they don't need to create new factions. There's so much old stuff that they just need to recycle and reuse and bring back into like a plastic range. They don't even need to do a whole army for Legion of Damned. They just need to do like an upgrade sprue, they either just do that or one like squad Or what you might
I
get
think
is
they
one of
need
those
to-
limited edition models, like the Noise Marine that they did. Something like that, really out there.
I think they need to take more mad risks. I'm in favour of all the mad risks. I like
Brand new stuff.
the idea.
Brand new stuff.
No, well, brand new stuff or stuff that messes with old stuff. Like I was hugely in favour of you know,
those
of
Dino
like,
Eldar.
yeah, well, yeah, the Exodites. But I was hugely in favour of them mucking around with the ending of the Horus Heresy. Like, I didn't mind the idea of that. Like, I like the idea that when they get the Horus Heresy books finalised, the end of the Horus Heresy book is, you know, Sanguinius turning on the Emperor or something. Like, that kind of stuff amuses me. Like, the idea of them taking something that's established and mucking around with it. So, for example, I like the idea of Lehman Russ coming out of the warp as a Legion of the Damned leader with an army of Legion of the Damned. Like, imagine that.
I liked, so it was a few years ago, they had rumoured, I think it was like a fake data sheet, but it was actually such a cool idea. It was like Dark Wolves. So it was, he comes back from the warp, but he's just basically chaos tainted. He's not necessarily fallen to chaos, but he's definitely not a good guy either. And his whole army is like a new sub-faction of chaos and Space Wolves combined. A bit like the Fallen for Dark Angels. I was like, oh, that's a cool like concept that he's come back and he's actually not a good guy anymore.
I mean, that would be incredible. Although, again, we're getting into the end of the show rambling stuff that we should be doing. So we'll move on to that, I suppose. But there you go, guys. There's our thoughts on the Forge World Legends stuff. I mean, from a Krieg player's perspective, it's less than ideal. From a broader perspective, you know, it doesn't feel like a lot of the other armies are missing out on a huge amount, although obviously Eldari, Necrons, Tau have definitely suffered a lot of losses, as has Chaos in terms of things that they can use in a competitive sense. But at the same time, I think, you know, the implementation of all this has left a little bit to be desired. But there you go. Legends. All happy with that, Phil?
Yeah, I think we covered an awful lot and we've rambled a lot. I'm sure people will be complaining that we've missed out on a lot. Like, we haven't talked about, you know, the Repressor or the Inquisition or Chaos or the Renegades and Heretics, which is a massive line of cool models, which is, if you think about it, so the new Darktide game that's coming out, what are those characters you're fighting? Renegade and Heretics. And they look exactly like the Forge World ones. And yet you can't buy those models anymore. There's no rules for them.
Because that seems to be Games Workshop. That seems to be Games Workshop's strategy when it comes to their video game releases. Here's Total Warhammer, and it's like, oh, yes. It's Age of Sigmar now. Yeah. Oh yeah,
because there's that weird delay. Yeah, I mean, a bit of a shame. Like I said, just bring this stuff over to plastic. Like they've sort of done it with the Chaos, with the Blackstone Fortress stuff. I'd just like to see them do more of that and for it to be an official faction.
Do it as a range of official 3D printed models.
That's a topic for another day.
Well, exactly. All right, transitional noise. Woo!
Hi there, I'm Judy from well-known couple Richard and Judy. When I'm not writing sexy books or getting my toes licked by Richard, well, then I'm listening to the Look Out Sir podcast, and I applaud everybody who's doing it too. Richard, come in here and tell me I'm pretty. Richard!
So there we go, Phil. The first of the shows without Joe, and trying out this new weird approach of quicker intros and then rambling at the end. Very weird, isn't it?
I know. That's time to get rambly.
Well, exactly. I suppose the thing is with it, and the reason why we felt like it needed to go that way, and it's not because we're doing any kind of like chasing the numbers or things of that nature. We just sort of found that now that Joe's gone, it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense us trying to keep things the same as what they were before. So we felt like tightening up the intro is probably a good move for us, because it's something that now that we're going weekly, having that kind of general comedic bants at the start of every single episode, though, was quite interesting for us and for a lot of people who really enjoyed listening to the show on a regular basis. I imagine it's quite a barrier to entry for people. And we want more people to get into the show. And I think if people will more likely get into the show by hearing what we have to say on the topics that they're interested in, and then potentially then converting them into people that like the ramblings and like the other kind of weird insights that we bring to things. So that's the logic there, basically.
Well, I think also if we're going weekly, then basically, and you're still rambling at the beginning of the intro, the same amount that we always do, what you end up doing is doubling the amount of rambly intros you have over a period of 2 weeks, and then you've actually got less content. So because we've got effectively one big segment per episode now, we need to kind of give that more time. So it's the same length as it always would be, which does mean cutting down the intro a bit, but then we can, any extra time at the end, we can still just ramble away.
Yeah, get into some other topics. I mean, it's interesting at the moment as well, because there's not a huge amount that there was out there to talk about. I mean, in terms of 40K, the only real bit of news that we got over Christmas was the Christmas Day reveal of the Sisters and Drakari box set, right?
So there was a couple of other announcements that they've done since then. So there was obviously the Christmas Day preview, which no Primark, so in comparison is always going to be underwhelming to when
that was when Lilith and that Sisters character that we'd all already seen got put out, right?
Yeah, I mean the Sisters character I quite like. Lilith,
it's all right.
I think it had a bit of mixed reviews around the interwebs, but I didn't mind it.
Yeah, the Sisters character is fine. Lilith, I'm not a fan of Lilith, it has to be said. I think they've done... I mean, again, people who have tried to defend Lilith are saying that it's the paint job's fault, not the miniature. And obviously the photographic angles that they've done have also not done it any favours. But I am surprised that they went that direction with Lilith. And I think I'm especially surprised when you have seen the reimaginings that they were able to achieve for so many of the iconic characters. I mean, when you look at Ragnar Blackmane, when you look at Gaskell Fracker, when you look at Jane Zar and Drazar, in terms of characters that have come back in these reimagined forms lately, Chief Librarian Tigerius, the list goes on and on in terms of these reimagined characters that they've done. They've all managed to maintain the essence of that character, but just improve upon it in a really dramatic way. I mean, Gazcol early doors, I wasn't mad thrilled on, but once you actually see the stature and the size of the miniature, some of my weird little concerns with it very quickly went away when you saw it in reality and you realized what a monstrosity it was. In terms of size and stature,
I think we've been saying it for a long time. Like the first impression you have from the first photos that they show you always tends to be a bit underwhelming. But once you do see a model in person, in a cabinet painted up, if you can, like if you go to Warhammer World, the amount of times it blows our socks off. And I was like, I thought that model looked a bit rubbish in those photos. But then when you see it in person, it always looks better. So I understand your reservations. They may be valid, but they might not be. And the fact that it might be a paint job, it might be just a funny angle, because obviously these are very 3D sculpted models. They're designed to be looked at from multiple angles. There's often no like one true great viewing angle, I find, when it comes to photographing a mini. But they've got to make do somehow.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. The thing with the Lilith stuff, and I do understand where people are coming from, is they've kind of... Because the thing is with Lilith is very much one of the few characters in 40K that is described as being a really beautiful, like traditional beautiful feminine character. And the fact that they've kind of given a bit of a kind of old hag look is a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of the Drakari guys, and especially when they did so well at reimagining Drazar and reimagining Jane's are. I think they may have potentially had a bit of a shot on a miss when it comes to Lilith. I don't hate it. I think maybe with the right paint job, it could be okay. But I think genuinely there's a lot of better miniatures in the Escher range from Forge World that would have potentially probably still could be a much better baseline like miniature for them to kind of build upon in terms of creating something a little bit more iconically Lilith. But again, bar that, I think the only other stuff I remember in terms of their previews and other things, they showed us a bunch of new stuff for like Age of Sigmar. They showed us a bunch of new stuff for their other kind of like specialist games and bits and pieces. But yeah, in the general sense, we're relatively light on the ground as we wait for the Death Guard.
Well, there's, I was going to say, I was looking at the Lilith model and I was like, oh, she's not that bad. And then I realised I was actually looking at the old one on the Games Workshop web store. And when you do the comparison between the two, you can see where it's all come from. I think, yeah, I think maybe it's just her proportions are a bit different, so it throws people off. And she's very Abby.
She's definitely done a lot of sit-ups. Also, there's a lot of criticism of her feet. A lot of people have been saying that she's got dwarf feet.
Yeah, they look bit, but
there was a lot of those dwarf memes going around for her. Some people are under the impression that there are no dwarf women and so on and so forth.
But in terms of other stuff, they've announced the anniversary store models. So there's a really nice Necron model, because that kind of got leaked. So we talked about it last time. It was like a little Necron model appeared in when they're talking about the like kind of create your own army using the app. Going back to the Forge World Legends stuff for 1 second, those models don't exist in the 40k app. So how are you meant to do a casual game list building when you can't even get the models in the app that they want you to use?
Has this got something to do with these anniversary models? So if you just
it just completely because the original, right? So the Necron model from the anniversary model was first appeared in the "You Can Win This Army" competition photo that was to do with the app. Crazy segue. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The other thing I've noticed with the weird way they've done those Forge World rules is, so even in the compendium, where they say, smoke launchers reference this data sheet, or a battle cannon. Well, actually, no, it's more to do with war gear stuff. So smoke launchers referencing the sort of Rhino or whatever it is for the Space Marines. But when you look at the Forge World unit in Battlescribe or Battleforge, it still says smoke launchers, see this unit. You've got to then, there's not even a tappy link that you can do. It's like where it says smoke launchers, just tell me what the smoke launchers rule are. You've literally copied it verbatim from the book.
I was wanting to get into the app with you quickly, actually, but before we do that, we should probably just talk about the weird Necron that's doing something quite shifty with his left hand.
He's a dodgy fella for sure. This is the first time I've looked at both anniversary models and gone, I might buy them. Like the Age of Sigmar one, I think is really interesting. The Stormcast Eternal. I was like, conversion possibilities for him is like an Inquisitor or Space Marine. He's got a bit of a monk-esque haircut for Black Templars, I think, and just the Necron guy I think is cool.
He's a bit weirdly, he's a bit weirdly devious, though, isn't he? In the way that
He's all
he's
hunched over and stuff, isn't he?
hunched over and maybe enjoying himself a little bit too much, shall we say?
He's a bit of a Joe in a hotel room, as we were saying in last episode.
Oh yes, yeah, very much a bit of a Joe in the hotel room. There, he's definitely bashing one out.
You meant to imply it, not say it.
I meant to imply, not say it. Well, I didn't go so far. I mean, that's still anyway. It's fine. I didn't say
he's bashing out a set of models. He's painting them. Obviously, that's what we mean by.
That's what he was saying. That's what we were talking about. It absolutely. He was keeping his tools wet, as you say, or maybe not. Maybe he likes to just keep them dry. Who can say?
Anyway,
the point is, though, I mean, it's interesting that this Cryptek model is coming in as a kind of limited release thing, because I think in a lot of respects people are looking at this as a good option for the Technomancer, of which there isn't an official model for yet, or something along those lines, or however it works. So, yeah, I think I mean, it's an okay miniature, all things considered. The new Necron range across the board is pretty good. But talking about the app with you, Phil, because the app's been an interesting one. So the last time we talked about the app was when they'd first released Battle. What is it called? Is it Battleforge? Okay. Fine.
So the app itself is just Warhammer 40k. The Battle Forge is the list builder.
That's it. And it is pretty awful still, I have to say. I mean, so I haven't checked in a while, actually. Let's have a...
Well, so I can give my own personal update on this, because long-time listeners will understand is I did not have a phone that could run Battlescribe. But I do...
Are you showing off that you've got a new phone now, Phil? Is that what you're doing here?
Well, I hit my birthday over Christmas period. I treated myself to a new phone.
Did your mummy buy you a phone?
No, I bought it myself.
With your birthday money?
With my birthday money, yes, from my mummy. Yeah. And I got it, and I was like, oh, cool. Man, this is confusing. Like, everything's split out by book rather than faction. And I'm going to go search, for example, and I'm going to type in Krieg, and what I get is the Deathcore Krieg Medipack, the Deathcore Krieg Voxcaster, which are, I believe, just war gear choices. Then you get the Krieg Combat Shotgun, which, when I click on it, gives me the old index rules for the Krieg. It's not the new one from the Forge World Compendium, even though I've paid and it hooks up my code from the Forge World Compendium. So I'm getting old index rules here for the Krieg, but also in that search result, that is the only search result. So there's no other Krieg unit. It doesn't give me the option to, like, maybe you want to select a faction and see all the units within that faction. That would be sensible. Yeah, it's just that in itself just is my first initial odd one. Also, every time I've tried to create an army, I always seem to give it an unnamed name, and then I don't know how to go back and name my army because I seem to skip over that very first step in the army builder. Some of it is quite cool, though. I like sort of how you build up your army. I like that it's very well visually presented, where you've got like little photos for the units that do have photos, because obviously not all of them do. I mean, it's also crashed on me a couple of times. But yeah, I seem to have gotten away from some of the worst offending bugs, where some people have just been locked out, or they've bought and they've used their code, but they've still not got access to those rules. Obviously, I'm currently doing the 1 month free subscription to just sort of test and see what it's like. And even then, so I'm a subscriber. I've got Battleforge. When you're building your army, you're still you're locked out of the data sheets for armies that have new 9th edition codexes. So, for example, what is it, like Blood Angels, for example? So if I was to create a Blood Angels army, it's like I could view the army and I can kind of build an army with them. But then if I go in to like look at the stats, then that's all locked away. But you can see all the old stuff, and I'm a bit like, I'm a paid subscriber. It seems odd that that stuff's still locked away, but I guess that's them encouraging you to buy the books.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
not
But then
model, for sure.
it's completely counterintuitive, though, right? Because the thing is there should be two models to this, right? There should be the free reference material, which is essentially you bought the book, put the code into the app, and then you have it as
a digital codex. Yes.
Yeah, as a compendium and a thing that you can have on you. But then there needs to be the subscription model, which needs to be everything unlocked while you're a subscriber.
100%.
And, maybe increase the subscription cost as a result of that. Maybe increase the subscription cost to an annual, 50 quid or an annual whatever. Like, make it, if you're worried about the potential loss in revenue from book sales, by all means increase your price. But the thing is the overall offering needs to be better. At the moment, this isn't better than Battlescribe. I think a year from now, this could be one of the most incredible, army building tools. But at the moment, it's just a bit of a poor, addition. Crashes a lot, isn't particularly user friendly, isn't up to date. So I've just checked. So Deathwatch, which is the army that I am doing at the moment, they've updated now to include the Fortis kill team has now been added.
Finally, because I was trying to build a Deathwatch kill team for the competition this week, and it's like the one unit I wanted is it a Fortis? Is that the heavy intercessors?
No. So that's still not in here.
That's the one that's not in there. Yeah, Fortis is in there. Yeah.
Well, previously there wasn't Fortis and Indomitus. Now that they've managed to at least update to have one of them.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
now I'm assuming there's either there could only be one reason why it's not in there, which is potentially we don't sell heavy intercessors yet, so we've decided to take it out. But then heavy intercessors are in there as an option. Yeah. So it doesn't make any sense. And that's the problem, right? It's like, and also the other thing that drives me crazy about the app is, right, and again, this is really finicky stuff, but it matters in certain scenarios. There are instances where, well, basically, if a book comes out on a Saturday, it takes this app up to like 5 days to catch up. I don't know whether that's just to do with when GW get to update the app database with the various, providers, Apple, Google, what have you, and then it gets, refreshed and goes into the server and goes on to the...
be running off of their own databases, like...
Yeah, but it should happen immediately, right? Yeah. Like, if a book comes out on a Saturday, it should be on here on a Saturday, right? And it's one of those...
When the Forge World units actually updated a few hours before the FAQ came out, because all of a sudden a few things appeared and it was like, oh, this is different. And then it actually got corrected in the, not corrected, but had the official stamp of approval when the FAQ dropped a few hours later. So they can release things ahead of schedule. But for the big codexes, it seems a bit slow at the moment.
Yeah, and I don't know whether that's to stop people from like data mining certain things, or they worry about certain scenarios. But the point is, right, is where this is most useful is as a reference tool. That's where it's most useful as. If you and also you need to, like, there's a few things I would add to this, right, to immediately make it more useful. Option number one is I would give people the opportunity to turn off stuff they don't care about at that moment in time. So say, for example, if you and I were playing a game, Phil, and I wanted to use this exclusively for referencing, I should be able to go into my library and go, cool, I'll turn everything off except Craftworld Eldari and Astra Militarum Death Corps of Krieg. And I could just go everything off except these two books. And then every time I search for something, the only stuff that will come up is stuff that relates to the thing that I want. Because at the moment, the minute I write death in as much as I want to look for Death Riders, I mean, I'll do the exercise right now. Sorry, hang on, get back into the app. Right, okay. Oh no, I'm in Battleforge still. Reference. Right, so I'll type in death. Right, so literally, okay. A taste of death. A vigil unmatched. The King of Blades. Right, okay. Abaddon the Despoiler. Like, all I've written is death.
So interestingly, I get doing the same thing. A Taste of Death is a stratagem. I get Angels of Death detachment ability. I also get Angels of Death again. Another, dear God, how many times? Like 8 times appear? Hold on, let me count. Oh, I also get Angels of Death abilities. So Angels of Death is repeated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh God, yeah, I've got that as well.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. And obviously that is for each specific chapter. So White Scars, Blood Angels, whatever. But there's no reference to what that source is to on that search. I mean, all this stuff I'm sure has been fed back to them. I'm sure they're going to improve it. Out the gate, it's just a bit frustrating at times.
Also, are you finding, Phil, that your Death Rider command squad is referenced twice in this?
From what point of view? Like where? When you search, or
when you search Death Rider command squad, Death Rider command squad, Death Rider squadron, Death Rider squadron. Death Rider Squadron Commander, Death Rider Squadron. There's 2 entries for every Death Rider.
I don't know why. But I also don't know how you can... Hold on, where is the...
Very odd.
Yeah, so even like from just a most basic thing, you go to the Imperial Armor Compendium, you then select data sheets, and then you literally just have all the data sheets alphabetized. There's no way to sort them by faction. Like, that is 101 basic stuff that they should have in here, and it's a bit frustrating that they don't. So yeah, basically everything relies on the search, because the UI for the actual navigating around the pages is so bad no one wants to use them, so you're just relying on the search. But the search functionality, or the results that you get from search functionality, just aren't very well categorized and displayed either.
Well, and it really, the search functionality is terrible, because, for example, I was searching for Termagants the other day, because one of the guys from Rapid Fire Wargaming was asking about the Termagon, which is the not the Termagon, the Trigon, which is the is it Trigon?
I think it is the Trigon,
yeah, the thing that comes out from the ground. He was like, "Are these any good?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, they are good, because you can combo them with Termagons, and then you can take like 30 Termagants." Not Termagants, sorry, Termagaunts, and have them come out with it, and then use that shoot strike twice stratagem to let off loads of shots at strength 4, rerolling ones to wound, so on and so forth. And I was like, but I need to check this stuff. But all of a sudden, I couldn't remember the exact spelling of Termagaunt, because it's not a real word that you ever really use that often. And that's where the thing falls over, because you're there going, right, well, that doesn't work. And then you're like, oh, God, got to go into the thing. And other instances where, like, you know, like you might just write, a specific thing, but then you forget to put like captain at the front of it, or you might forget, it will just, because it demands that the way you write it is exactly as the data sheet appears. You can't just, and if it's a catch-all term, then you just get everything else in alphabetical order that precedes it, and it's like, oh God. And again, I'm not just wanting to get into a segment where we just wail on the thing, but as I say, it is 8 months to a year away from being fantastic. It is presently not fantastic, and I will not be resubscribing once my free month has essentially been done. By January, I'll be done with it.
Yeah, what I would like them to do is, as you said, you get your book, you pay for your codex, you get code. That should unlock a digital version of the codex, so you get all the rules, the artwork, everything like that. You also get your kind of cool reference rules, which is how it's currently presented. Really nicely laid out. You can search for them, brilliant. But what I would also like as part of that is I can use Battleforge for that army. So for free, I can build to my heart's content for that one army. And that's probably, but I don't think they'll do that model, because that's probably how most people would do it. And then the subscription model is I can build army lists for everyone, and probably get all the quick references as well. And then what the codexes are doing is they're just effectively either allowing me to do it for free for that army. If I'm just collecting one army, great. Or it's giving me the digital codex so I can read all the cool stuff and look at all the artwork. Maybe that's asking a bit too much from a free version if you've got the book, because then it's not pushing people.
Well, it's not a free version, is it? You paid 25 quid for the book. It's like it's hard to service.
Yeah, if the subscription version unlocked all the rules, I don't need the digital codexes. I'll happily get that specifically with my physical codex. But if it just unlocked the ability to build all the armies and see all the rules and the stats and data sheets for that army, then the subscription's worthwhile.
Well, also as well, like, and again, I'm conscious of the fact I didn't get a chance to finish my point about the whole codex is not updating day and date, right? Because what I was going to say is this thing is a really important reference tool. And if you're the kind of player under normal circumstances who gets their army day one, and is super excited and gets some mates around and starts playing games, as we have done in the past when new books have dropped, we've been out there straight away going, right, going to play the new codex. Having something like this for that weekend's gaming, say you're going to get like 3 or 4 games in, the idea of just being able to go, cool, I've got a rough idea of how all this stuff works, but just having this here as a quick reference tool becomes super valuable. That's amazing. But unfortunately, this thing ain't getting updated till Wednesday. So you're in a situation where you're like, well, cool. Well, I've unlocked it on the app, but it's nothing on there yet. So I guess I've got to continue using the book. And not that you shouldn't continue using the book, but it sort of immediately removes a benefit that this potentially represents. And it sort of annoys me because, like, it just, again, it's one of those things. It's a gripe. It's not a completely damning situation. It's just a bit annoying. That's all. And that's the thing.
I think it, like I said, it's going to be really good. I think we just need to give them time. And I think the disappointing thing is you sort of would have thought they'd ironed most of this out. They sort of promised at the start of 9th edition there's going to be this cool app where you can do all this amazing stuff. And then it didn't come for ages. And then it still didn't come for ages. And then eventually it came. It's really, it's sort of a bit like Cyberpunk. It's a bit broken, a bit buggy. It sort of underperforms based on what they promised. So now we just got to wait it out until it does get better. And I think they're probably putting a lot of time and effort and, hiring new people to make more of it.
Yeah, but again, I just think it's sort of indicative of GW's rollout strategies for a lot of things, right? It's like they're not really thinking about the best way to kind of project manage and deal with these things, and ultimately they're not getting the best people involved to make these things work from the outset. And that's the thing. I think the app is, look, the 40k players are incredibly forgiving and incredibly compromising human beings with their approach to anything related to the hobby and anything from GW. Or at least I am, at least you are, at least a lot of the people I know personally are. Maybe a vocal minority on the internet are different, but speaking as a vocal minority on the internet. But yeah, look, I think it's one of those things where it just frustrates me because it's such an own goal at the moment where it's like it could have been, and you see the potential, and I really, really hope that they live up to the potential. But even then, right, every single release that comes out at the moment chips away at the value of this subscription, because every time a new codex drops, your subscription is becoming less valuable
because it's being locked out. Yeah, which sort of makes me think, I sort of wish they would change their tune on that, because, yeah, like you said, if eventually all the codexes have come out and all your subscription is giving you is the quick reference and the ability to do Battle Forge, which I think you can do with every army, but you just can't see any of the stats. that's kind of pointless, because it's like, cool, I can create an army, but I don't know what the army does. Oh, you mean I've either got to look it up in a codex, and if I've got that, then great. But then it's like, what am I paying a subscription for? I think this is where the thing is. It's like, if this app was 100% free, all sins would be forgiven. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's crap because it's free. It's like, I think the community could get on board with that so much more easier. I think the reason why people are getting a bit picky about it is because they're paying money for it. It's like, it's and it's, like I said, it's like £5 a month. Is it £4 quid? £5 quid? It's like, it's not, something like that. It's not a huge amount, but it's a lot for an app subscription. Most app subscriptions are like £1 a month or less. So
you could buy 8 Greg's sausage rolls for £4.
I mean, most people, the argument is it's like, oh, it's a price of a beer a month, and it's like, fair enough. But as app subscription goes, I think it's quite expensive by a lot.
Oh, totally.
So that's where the comparison suddenly comes in. But if it was free, and most, a lot of other games companies do similar things for free. It's just value added onto the game system. You want kids to get into this, and you can give them an app that they can play the game much more easier, much more enjoyable. That's a positive benefit to your customers. You don't need to monetize it. Or if you do monetize it, you got to make it really good, and it's got to be bug free. And yeah, I'm glad that they've kind of gone back and given us another month free, because at least I missed out on the first time it was free. So
you didn't miss out, mate, because it was even more atrocious.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I sort of wish they changed their subscription model ever so slightly, or just ditch it.
I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with asking for subscriptions. I just think you need to change what you're getting for it. I think it needs to be everything, and I'd be fine with that. But I think, again,
if that is the case, then maybe make it more money.
But Games Workshop don't want to risk hurting book sales, right?
Yeah, I think also what they're risking, because they're sort of losing out on digital book sales at the moment, because they got rid of all their digital books. There is no digital books. If you're someone that wants to buy every single book, but just digitally, so you've got it on your phone, you don't want 20 books clustering up a bookshelf like you have, Dan. Like,
if only it was 20, mate.
I know. I can see the logic behind people doing that, and it's like, it's sort of madness that they've got away with it. It's like, I think they've probably done it for a copyright reason, like in terms of piracy, so they don't want people accessing them, ripping them off and distributing them for free. So I get that, but it's like, if you can, within that app, buy the digital codex, and it's like £5. It's completely separate. It doesn't unlock anything in the app. If the app is still unlocked by the physical copy, and the physical copy gives you the digital version as well, it's like, cool, that's the main route of entry into using the app and, using your rules. But for like £5 just to access a digital codex, it's like, why not? It's again, they're frustrating players by taking that away from the people that did use it.
Yeah, it's a strange series of very disjointed business decisions that, objectively don't really make a huge amount of sense. And I think that's the thing with all of this, is the way that they've rolled this stuff out is just a bit haphazard. And again, yeah, like I say, right now, I spent the money to get my buy one, get one free. Because again, let's be completely honest about the free month. It's not a free month. It's a 2-for-1 sale. You're not getting a month for free. You're getting 2 months at half price or whatever. Which again is fine. But yeah, I will not be continuing to subscribe to this.
See, I assumed it was, you subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything for the first month. But then if you stay on for the second month, that's when you just get billed for the second month. So if I've been charged for the first month.
But then I have to be honest, I'm basing my statement based on how it was the first time around, so I could be misrepresenting what this is.
Okay.
Either way, I'll be unsubscribing very soon because it hasn't wowed me. I'm perfectly content with using the app for its reference capabilities for the books that I own, because I own every 40k book that's been released so far, and I'll use Battlescribe for everything else, because Battlescribe is a superior app at this moment.
Yeah, I think at the moment in terms of list building, it's just a bit better. Like,
it's a nicer user experience.
Yeah, I think the Games Workshop one will be eventually. It visually looks better. The way you do detachments and stuff is a lot easier to get your head around than Battlescribe. I think Battlescribe, once you learn how to use it, is a good product, but there's a lot of unintuitive elements, like how you go around adding multiple factions to a single detachment, for example, is super confusing, and you basically need to be taught how to do it. I think what they need to do is do another big update for that Games Workshop app just before the free period ends, to encourage people to stay subscribing, because they'll probably get a lot of people drop off otherwise. Because what they almost need, you need that monthly incentive of new features are coming, new fixes are coming every single month to keep people to want to be subscribed. I'm sort of.
They have also managed, on the topic of the Death Watch actually as well, they have managed to fix the weird bug they were having before, where loads of Blood Angels units were listed as Death Watch options as well. But they haven't 100% fixed it, because the Sanguinary Priest is still there as a HQ choice for Death Watch at the moment.
Random.
There's
little things. So when you do Space Marine HQ options, you obviously get all the Inquisition stuff, and it's like, it sort of feels like that should be tucked away in a separate tab or a different setting, because otherwise it just, especially with Space Marines where there's so many choices, like you're scrolling for days on that one just to look at the HQ
painful
options.
It's quite nice. It is really nice where you go into other codexes, other armies, and you go, oh god, this is so nice, versus trying to make Marines work. I mean, they have become a horrible mess of a thing, unfortunately. But there we go. But how are you doing otherwise in your hobby pursuits, Phil? I mean, beyond the app side of things, I mean, what have you been working on? What have you been getting up to?
Well, 2 projects. So over Christmas time, I was finishing off some of my Mordheim Warband. I'm still working on them, and obviously this isn't 40k, so I'll be super quick. But basically, I have been sculpting my little pig. So I've been creating a little green stuff pig, which you can go check out on my Beyond the Tabletop Instagram, #casualbug.
You've been stuffing your pig, Phil.
I've been stuffing my pig. Basically, I took a toy pig from eBay. I think it was like £4 for a set of like 10 farmyard animals, and I wanted to find something that was a decent scale for the Games Workshop miniatures. So it was reasonably compatible with some of the other models. I've got the wolves from the Snarfang Grippers, which are the goblin wolf riders from Warhammer Underworld. I've removed the goblins. I've green stuffed some fur where the rider was, so I've got a decent sort of comparison size. So, and I couldn't find a pig for life of days. I got was it Warlord War Games, for Bolt Action. They do farmyard animals. Those pigs, I got them far too small. So I got this toy one, super cheap. I gave the rest of the animals away in little bags for Halloween. That's how long ago I've been doing this. And I was slowly working on the model. And originally, I was just going to use it as is. But I decided it wasn't very good. So I chopped off its legs and I repositioned its head. I then put wires in for armatures for the legs, and I started green stuffing that. And basically, little by little, over like a month and a half, slowly adding it onto it. And I basically completely re-sculpted the pig. So I was
going to say, by the end, how much of the original pig remained?
Well, inside, there's still a pig head and a bit of pig body, but I completely re-sculpted it all. So even the head and the details on top. So I basically just used it as a base. And, it's basically been my first model I've 100% sculpted myself. Like I've always done little bits here and there. I did a rooster which I sculpted, which was an icon for my banner bearer in my Halfling Blood Bowl team. That was quite a few years ago. That was the first proper like sculpting thing I'd done. This is much bigger, but it's a really good like little trick to use a model and just sculpt on top of it, because then you've got the base shape to an extent and proportions for the head and stuff. But then I can
based on that though, Phil, can you actually say 100% sculpt, or would you say it's more 90%?
Well, I think the finished model is very much 100% my own.
All right, fair enough. It's a shell.
Well, it's like how I think it was at Hasbro. It was either He-Man or Star Wars. This is the random tangent section, guys. Get your cozies on. It was one of those where they were in such a rush to produce the line. They basically just took the armatures from other dolls, like from another company, and then just sculpted on top of them. So they had the mechanical arm joints pre-done, but then they created, the muscles and the faces and the skin.
Yeah, I don't think that was either He-Man or G.I. Joe necessarily, but I know.
Or Star Wars was.
It was Star Wars, yeah. So Star Wars, they took, they took like armatures from a bunch of different, but that was a massive thing with the toys industry back in the day, kit bashing stuff together. Because He-Man famously has the Battle Cat.
Yes,
and the Battle Cat is based off of a toy that was made in the 70s about exploring the wilds of like South America, and it was like a big crazy tiger,
and they basically green and put on a harness or something. Yeah,
and then when they made the Battle Cat, they realized they had to make an evil counterpart for Skeletor, so they ended up then doing what is the name of that one? Pantera or something? Not Pantera,
Isn't that bad?
Something like that.
Okay.
And that one was literally just a leopard version of it that they then basically felted, or not even felted, they flocked it entirely. It's mad, isn't it? It's crazy what these old toy companies just got away with, where everything's just recasts and
it's like even Star Wars and like legitimate Star Wars movie props, so things like the X-Wing, the Y-Wing, they all use little they call them like gribblies, which is basically small components from other kits. And Adam Savage does a great there's a great YouTube video where he talks about this, because he was a prop maker for I think Phantom Menace and a couple of other like big movies.
I mean, it was like the first Star Wars,
Yeah, he talks about there's a couple of kits. There's like a particular like World War I kit, and it's like every single like Star Wars vehicle has at least one piece from this particular kit that is just famous for having all these really cool like little items. So it's that kind of kit bashing mentality. It's interesting that it's so like legitimized in actual like industries. Yeah. So yeah.
I imagine I've never managed to sit and watch the entire credits of a Star Wars film, but I imagine they must have to shout out those toy manufacturers and the people that helped create these. This was made from all these bits.
Yeah, well, they don't do that, and that's the thing. I think there's like fair use. So you can take something and reinvent it, and so long as it's a small portion of your final model, you're kind of good to go, so to speak. They
are incredible though, those old kits, and what they used to do with that stuff is just bananas. But anyway, as you were saying, based on that, you're saying 100%.
100% pick. Well, yeah, I would say at least 95. The innards.
Yeah, I thought when you started talking about toys, I thought you were going to be talking about that obscure Transformer line where they had Transformers encased inside of beast shells. So they basically created like a Transformer toy, but then you could turn it into a beast. But the way you made it into a beast was you just took a clamshell of like a bear and just whacked it over.
No.
Yeah, it was very weird.
Yeah, so that was my first little project that I did, and then the one that is 40k related that I'm sort of going back to, I started it a while ago, is I'm scratch building some hoplite shields for my blade guard, for my Minotaur.
They are big shields.
They're pretty big.
See my compensating for something.
Well, they're meant to be big. Like Spartan shields are big boys. Because I've got some small shields that I got from Warcry, the Iron Golems team, and I used one of them for my Storm Shield on my Smash Captain, which is suitable because it's a lot smaller size and he's meant to be carrying it around. But for the infantry, for the Blade Guard, I wanted something a bit bigger. So I'm slowly scratch building that at the moment. So I've got my quandary that you and listeners can help me with. So basically, I'm going to, I've got a little shop where I sell these little kits that I make from time to time. The pig will also appear on there once I've cast him up. The shield.
Oh, you're going to cast him up. You're not going to hand sculpt every pig.
No, but I was thinking about doing some pig variants. At one point I was, and I don't know if I still will, I was going to make a Cyclops pig, and not in terms of the one eye, but the Cyclops demolition vehicle. I was going to basically sculpt on a saddle loaded with explosives.
Amazing.
So I could count my pig as a Krieg Cyclops demolition vehicle.
Maybe you can make those as like an extra set, so as you can add them to the pig.
An accessory kits, yes, like the Hasbro lines or what have you. So that was one mad option.
With Battle Cat, they could put accessories on it. Exactly. It was done.
That's clearly all I need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So for the hoplite shield, I'm trying to work out whether I should add in a hand or an arm built into the shield, or if I should just leave the shield plain and then let people kit bash like how they affix it to whatever model they might be using. So, for example, I'm using Blade Guard. The easy build kits are the only ones that are out, and it's like the hands and they're all different. Like some of the hands are attached to, all the hands are attached to the shields, but some of the hand plus forearm is also attached. So either way, I'm going to have to kit bash them when I'm using them myself. But I was thinking if I just left them plain and people wanted to make storm shields for, I don't know, assault intercessors, but because they're converting them to Vanguard or whatever, then they just need to like attach them to the hand that already exists. So I think that's an easy way of going about it.
Yeah, I think for the sake of giving it the most viability for people, I think it's always best that you don't just assume that everyone's going to use them for Space Marines. Could have a lot of potentially funny options for like orcs, for example. Maybe you should do a range of orc helmet heads with all of the kind of Roman helmet style things, like gladiatorial helmets.
No, yeah, that would be pretty good.
Add that to the orc range. But yeah, no, I think honestly, if you're going to do it, I think probably. I mean, it depends what you've got capacity to do, mate. I mean, honestly, the best case scenario, do both. But if you can't do both, do without.
Yeah,
would be my preference.
Think sculpting a hand will be a challenge, but I think it is possible. So if I could get away with not doing that, that's the easiest of the two.
Let's be honest, right? You're not sculpting a proper hand in that scenario. It's essentially a fist potato that just goes on behind the shield.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to start to do something ridiculous where you're going to add some like articulation to the fingers, so, like the idea of them doing all sorts of like.
No, but you are right. It's like a gripped hand.
Yeah.
But I
can't imagine.
I think the other benefit of not doing it that way is if I don't have a hand on, then the shields can be left and right-handed. Whereas if
you can put them on their backs as well.
Yeah, and obviously I'm thinking about it in terms of the Blade Guard captain as well. So he's like holding his shield up, right? He's not actually. So for him, it's like I need a shield that hasn't got the hand in the usual kind of grip place anyway.
Yeah. The problem is for the Blade Guard captain though is that shield is massive. So if you were going to do one for him, you probably need to look at getting maybe like a base extender or something for it, because it sits on the so maybe I don't know if there's like a little rocky plinth that you can add, because even though your bases are quite big, they're not going to be that big.
No, I don't.
And also the thing is, with the way that kit goes together, the hand is attached to the shield, and it is probably going to be very difficult to get that hand out for that shield.
Yeah,
but not
unless
impossible.
I've got to sculpt on some fingers or something.
Yeah, well, and also that particular arm is very weird as well, because it's got lots of like parchment from a a seal, a purity seal around it.
Yeah.
So it's quite a weird one, to be honest with you.
Mm.
I mean, it's good in a way because because that aspect gives you a certain level of flexibility. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, interesting, mate. There you go. Got some projects on the go. I mean, on my side of things, I've been converting Deathwatch Outriders because I love me some metagaming. So I've now made 15 Deathwatch Outriders because I'm a fun guy. I've also been shaving off the shoulder pads from Eradicators because I'm going to be adding those to my Indomitus kill teams. I've been doing the same for some Inceptors as well. I'm just chomping at the bit for the heavy intercessors to drop so as I can purchase those and add them to my force. I did a really awesome painting project over the last 24 hours. My friends at work sent me a custom miniature that is me. So they made me a custom miniature of myself.
That sounds quite
wielding a broadsword and a chicken leg because I do like fried chicken.
on your adventures off to Hooters, clearly.
Exactly. So I've been painting that. It was quite an interesting one. So I don't know what company they bought it from, but I assume it's a service where you get a bunch of generic bits and then they put it together for you as a custom miniature, and it must be all 3D printed. It definitely had a lot of release agent on it when I got it. Like when it got out of the packaging, I was like, "Geez, this is sticky." So I had to wash it quite a lot and varnish it before undercoating. But I'm actually really happy with the results. I'll probably have finished it by the weekend. So before this episode comes out, or hopefully shortly thereafter, I'll post a picture of it on my Instagram so people can see what I've done with it. But yeah, it's not a miniature that I'll be technically allowed to take to GW anytime soon because obviously it's a Warhammer world because it's obviously not an official Games Workshop sculpt. But yeah, I dare say this will become a mascot of myself on the battlefield should I ever want to, have me just running around, in some kind of form, within the ranks of my army. I could make myself an objective,
Yes, you've got to hold and secure Dan with chicken wing.
Exactly. I look after my chicken wing. It's really beautiful. I'm very happy with it, and I'm actually quite proud of how it's actually looking so far. I mean, it's not my best work by any stretch of the imagination because I don't think. I mean, there are some imperfections with the sculpt, as it were, that I've had to work around. But yeah, when it's done, I'll share it on the interwebs and people can see the glory that is my model representation. One of the interesting design decisions they've gone for, though, Phil, and you will have seen this when I sent you a photo, they've opted to put a mask over my mouth and nose, and I'm assuming they've done that so as a studio don't need to actually create a true likeness. They can just go, there's his hair, and that'll do.
Is it not like a COVID edition, though? Do you not think they've done it deliberately?
Maybe it's the COVID edition. Because my hair is getting quite long at the moment, Phil.
Yeah, I can see.
It's going a bit. I can full on tie it back now.
Oh wow! Go for the old man.
I know. It's ridiculous. It's I start a new job soon. I'm going to look ridiculous. People are going to be like, "What are you?"
Not tempted for the old lockdown buzz cuts.
No, I can't get involved in that noise. I've never been a buzz. Well, that being said, like it'd be funny actually. I was thinking because the last time I got my haircut was February last year, so I was thinking of doing like a side by side of this was me in February, this is me a year later, because it is a lot longer than it was in February. So there you go. I have not had my haircut since February.
That is a long time.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It grows a lot. That's all I can say. I am lucky. I'm not one of the however many percent of men it is that lose all their hair by the time they're in their mid-30s.
I don't know. But yes.
There you go. Yeah. Neither are you, Phil. We're a hairy bunch.
No, I know. We're very hairy.
Exactly. Joe's losing it, though. Poor old Joe.
Slowly receding.
It is. He was hilarious the other day. He was on one of their live streams and he said, "Don't show the overhead camera. I don't want people seeing my bald spot." I was like, "Oh, Joe."
No, poor Joe.
Everyone could see it. Poor boy. Anyway, there you go. We promise that as time goes on, we'll stop talking about him so much. Although it is funny that he's not on this show because he's still. I mean, I chatted to Joe on the phone yesterday for about 2 hours. So
that's the unrecorded podcast, basically.
Honestly, man, like, you know, if only we could. It'd be like, as he always used to say, it'd be like a Hollyoaks After Dark episode if you actually got to listen to
maybe
me and Joe
record a couple of things.
Well, like what happened to Donald Trump. Yeah. Oh, you're not familiar with that situation in America where someone secretly recorded Donald Trump trying to do something silly?
Maybe the one that was on the coach years ago, or this is like a
no. It was literally just recently. Anyway, we're not a political podcast. We're not going to get. We're going to move on. Well, we're not going to move on. We're just going to end. So look, there you go, guys. That was our first episode in this new weekly format. We hope that for those of you that enjoy our 6-hour-long epics, that you won't mind the fact that you'll be getting them still just delivered on a weekly basis, as it were. So we're aiming to do about 2.5, 3 hours every week, and then you'll have to just, you know, put up with that. But in many respects, I think that'll be better because why not?
Exactly.
Although that rambling section, Phil, I mean, you said we would be done in about half an hour. It's been an hour.
Well, I feel like we went off on one on the app. Sorry, developers of GW, but you know, it's deserved.
Plus, we kind of got through the Legends thing quicker than we thought. I mean, it was very difficult for me and Phil because we normally, because of Joe, have to start recording around 9, and then we're normally not done till midnight. Whereas this time around, we started at 8, and the Forge World section was in the bag before 10. And we were like, wow, what do we do now?
There's so much you could talk about it still, like go through specific data sheets. But I think we called out a couple. I think that was fine. We don't need to dwell on it too much. We haven't talked about we talked about it briefly, but we didn't talk about the FAQ in particular. I don't think we really need to. But ultimately,
you just wanted to talk about the Krieg, Phil. You did your bit.
Originally you were like the Death Riders are really good, and you still stand by that. And I was like, but they're weapon skill 4, so they're not that good. And then there was a potential thing that it was all a bit of a mix-up because they've got ballistic skill 3+, and maybe they've been swapped around. But no, like they are weapon skill 4+, ballistic skill 3+. Confusing. I still think regular Death Riders aren't that good, but we won't go into it anymore because we've gone around Hazard.
We won't, because that's the end of the show now, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for supporting us. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, our first venture of the two of us doing this as a 2-man group, as it is. I mean, for those who didn't listen to the last episode where we said goodbye to Joe, to be clear, we aren't looking to replace Joe, but we will start to invite people on to contribute here and there. So most likely when the Death Guard book drops, our friend Tim is a big Death Guard player now. So he'll be someone we probably bring on to talk about that. Maybe when we start talking more about competitive stuff, we might get Adam on, or maybe some other people that we know in the competitive scene to contribute and give opinions on those things. And maybe we'll invite some of our loyal listeners who enjoy reaching out to us and talking nonsense to us on every now and again. We got Toke on once, didn't we? So, how bad could it be?
Exactly.
You know, add some random madness to the mix. It could be great.
Exactly.
But for now, we're going to love you and leave you. Thank you very much, guys. We'll be back with you next week, so check us out. Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.